I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Thursday, guys. Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is Dr. Cornel West. He is a former professor, author, actor, civil rights activist, and now presidential candidate for 2024 through the People's Party. Welcome back, Dr. West.
Well, what a blessing for me to be here. And I want to begin, like always, saluting you for your work, your courage, your vision, your perseverance, your forbearance, and the fact that you keep illuminating us and inspiring us. That's a beautiful thing in these grim days. No doubt about it. Hope you and your loved ones are doing well now.
Thank you so much, Dr. West. So last time you were here, I asked you if you would ever consider running for president as a third party candidate or independent. So you can imagine my excitement when I heard your announcement. I was very, very excited to hear that. And I'm curious. I said to myself, if Dr. West is running for president, he must feel that there is a sense of urgency for the American people. But I want to hear directly from you. Why did you decide to run for president? And how come you decided not to run through the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. No, it's true. I've said on a number of occasions that I would rather be in the crack house than the White House. The White House got more corruption than the crack house. Crack house, my brothers and sisters in there, they might be flying high in the friendly skies, but they can bounce back in ways and be forces of integrity, honesty, decency. White House people choose to be part of the empire. They choose to be part of the corrupt system and so forth. So it is true that, and I saw last night where you were kind enough to have me on from a few months ago, where I talked about, my calling is one in which I would do anything. If I had to write a song in a chord I never conceived of to be a force for poor and working people, I'd try to write that song, because that's where I come from. That's what my vocation is. That's what I'm put on the earth to do. And so when I looked and saw the low point, the nadir that we're at, and I didn't see anybody on the national scene, intellectual politics, really bringing insight to bear and witness to the legacies of the Martin Luther King Jr.'s and Fannie Lou Hamers and Ella Bakers and Rabbi Heschels and Edward Zaid's and Dorothy Days and Grace Lee Boggs and Luisa Moreno, one of the greatest freedom fighters, a Latino sister who was deported to Guatemala. I say to myself, that's the wind at my back. Who is being true to that legacy, which does what? Put the suffering and resilience and resistance of poor and working people, no matter what color, here and around the world, at the center of your vision and your analysis. And that's just what it is to be part of a tradition. It's like being a jazz musician. If I'm playing the saxophone, how do I keep alive the legacy of Charlie Parker and Coltrane? I don't care what everybody else is blowing. I know what the standards are. How do I keep the legacy of a Sarah Vaughan and a Billie Holiday if I'm a jazz vocalist? That's what the standards are. And that's how you view yourself. So you're not worried about the vicious attacks. You're not worried about the misunderstandings and so forth. You learn and listen from people, but you actually headed forward. So I decided, I said, well, let me make this move. Let me make this leap. And I tell you, I would have never known we'd have this kind of response. You know what I mean? 4 days ago, I'm just, walking around, finishing my teaching at Union Seminary, listening to Curtis Mayfield, reading much of Toni Morrison, right? Now, good God Almighty, 18 million on this video hits and all that. It's like, good God almighty, 5 or 6 shows a day. It's like, hey, keep the focus where it belongs. What's happening on the West Bank? What's happening in the landless peasants in Brazil? What's happening in the hood? What's happening on the reservation? What's happening to poor white brothers and sisters in Appalachia? What's happening to the trade union movement getting crushed? What's happening to the sisters dealing with domestic violence? The vicious attack on our precious trans. How do we keep the focus where it belongs? And one of the ways of doing that is running to be head of the empire in order to dismantle the empire in the name of poor and working people.
Well said, Dr. West. What are your thoughts on, because I know you came from the Bernie movement, what are your thoughts on Bernie Sanders and some of the members of the squad choosing to endorse Joe Biden? Jamal Bowman said recently at an event in DC that we have to drag this guy over the finish line. And my question was, why do you have to drag him? Why not just choose someone else? How do you feel about them choosing to endorse Joe Biden instead of choosing to endorse candidates like yourself or like Marianne Williamson, those that are running on the progressive issues that they actually agree with?
Yeah, no, indeed. Well, one is, I mean, I'll always have a deep love for Brother Bernie. You know what I mean? We've been through hell and high water together. We can have some disagreements, even deep ones, and still be brothers. I think he missed his moment when he could have broken from the milquetoast neoliberal Democratic Party, the corporate-dominated Democratic Party, and constituted a third wave. He decided not to. That's him. You know, I come from a tradition of black folks. Just lift every voice. He ain't got to be an echo of a silo. He can go on and lift his voice. I can hear the voice and say, well, no, I ain't going that way. I'm not going that way, Brother Bernie. That's not me. Like we fought against BDS in regard to Israel and Palestine. He was against it. I was for it. We worked together. We argued over and so forth. Reparations. I was for reparations. He was against it. We struggled over it together and still were able to come together and be forces for good. But I think they're wrong. I think that I was in their same position when I defended Biden because I thought at that time that the fascist takeover would shatter any possibilities for democracy. But then I began to rethink. I reread Glenn Ford, and I reread Brother Juma Baraka, and I reread Margaret Kimberly, and I reread a host of others saying, you don't really defeat fascism by having caretaker, milquetoast, neoliberal administration. The fascism sooner or later is going to take over if that's all you have to offer. If you can't speak to the needs of the people who are following neo-fascist Pied Pipers, then that fascism sooner or later is going to be the dominant one no matter what. And if the only argument you can put forward is, I'm not the almighty, but I am the alternative, I say, Brother Biden, get off the crack pipe, man. What you talking about? You tied to war crimes in Iraq. You tied to war crimes as one of the architects of the mass incarceration regime, which was one of the most vicious attacks on the history of black people. You tied to various crimes supporting Wall Street rather than homeowners. Don't talk about I'm the only alternative. What does that mean? That means that poor people and working people will get pushed to the margins no matter what. That means that the precious Palestinian folk on the West Bank, when the bombs hit, it be the Democratic Party, Republican Party, those are still precious people, innocent people and children getting killed. That's the vantage point from which you look at what it means to be a force for good in politics, Brother Biden. But he's not alone because neoliberalism is so pervasive. We saw it in Atlanta just the other day, right? Look at all the black folk for a cop city. Look at all of them across the board. And they know that's the militarization of the police that's going to have vicious attacks, not just on black people, on poor people and working people across the board. But somehow they're supposed to embrace that and still act as if they part of the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer and so forth. I said, no. Same when I choose Brother Bowman. Now, Jamal, I supported Brother Jamal, absolutely. But brother, if you're going to support Biden, tell the truth about Biden. Oh, you want stability? You want stability for the grotesque wealth inequality, for austerity for brothers and sisters of all colors on food stamps, but expand the military. Don't tell lies about Biden. Be honest about it. He's a hypocrite. He's
That's right.
cowardly when it comes to fighting for Black people. He can make a deal with the brother from West Virginia, the senator. What's his name?
Joe Manchin.
That's it, brother. He could make a deal with Brother Manchin, but can't make a deal with Brother Manchin when it comes to voting rights being at stake and pushing aside the filibuster bill. You say, oh, it's clear who you are. That's your priority. Oh, you got a different way of looking at the world than I do. And I don't have to accommodate myself to you. I accommodate myself to the needs of the people. Poor people, working people. I don't care where they are, not just in the United States, around the world. That's a different kind of orientation. You see what I mean?
I totally hear you on that. One of the things I really like is your campaign platform. I love what you have here. First and foremost, create true democracy. Immediately you express clean out government corruption. I think that is a big one. Ban corporate lobbying, revitalizing our economy. You talk about living wage and housing, of course, Medicare for all, ending the wars. That's a really big one for, at least for me and for a lot of other people that watch the show as well. Expand civil liberties, which mentions ending surveillance, the drug war, mass incarceration, also regulating AI and breaking up big tech. That's a big one. And protecting the environment. One of the ones that really stood out to me, and I would like for you to explain to people who may not be aware, disband NATO. So I 100% agree with that. Could you explain to people who may not fully understand, because I've been to anti-war rallies before where we've had signs say disband NATO and people will walk by and say, are you crazy? Can you explain to people why you think it's important that we disband NATO?
Well, I think we can see that very clearly in the situation in Ukraine right now. You got precious Ukrainian brothers and sisters who are suffering in ways we don't have a language for. We're always in solidarity with anybody who suffers. And you say, how did we find ourselves in a situation where the American empire promised Gorbachev, as the Soviet empire was dissolving, that NATO would not move 1 inch. And there was a consensus among Russian elites, right-wing, center, and progressive. If NATO moved 1 inch, like any empire, they would not only feel provoked, but they would feel as if the backs were being pushed against the walls. Fast forward to a few years later, 14 ex-Soviet countries are part of NATO, right on the border with missiles pointed toward Russia. Now, Putin's a gangster. I think we know that. No doubt about that. But if the United States had missiles in Mexico or Canada or Cuba or Venezuela, the U.S. government would have blown them to smithereens the first day. That's how empires proceed. An empire is an empire. It's predatory. It's greedy. It's obsessed with its own territory and its geopolitical interests and so forth. So the United States knew that they were pushing Russia against the wall. And then you end up with a war with our precious Ukrainian brothers and sisters with an invasion. Now, the invasion is a crime against humanity. There's no doubt about that. But when you pushed, and this is not a rationalization of Putin at all, it is his imperial response to the U.S. imperial use of NATO as an instrument of U.S. global power. And that's just a matter of truth. You could be actually conservative, centrist. We saw the piece in Harper's Magazine with Brother Benjamin Schwartz and the others telling the same story. They're not leftists. They're trying to be honest about Stephen Cohen, one of the great Russian historians, taught at Princeton and NYU for many years. He said the same thing. You know, Sister Katrina, his wife, who is the publisher of Nation Magazine, they said the same thing. Well, they were viewed as what? Oh, they must be Russian spies, Russian informers. You don't want to hear the truth. And so when I talk about NATO, what I'm saying is there's other ways of ensuring the safety of European nations other than having institutions that are the instruments of U.S. global power. And the Europeans are the ones who have to pay the price. And we headed toward what? Possible nuclear war.
Yep.
Hey, that's serious business. Possible blowing up of nuclear energy centers. That's serious business. Serious business. You see what I mean? And so, it's just a matter of, I said from the very beginning, that it's not just a campaign. I think every human being with integrity, honesty, and decency wants to be a force for good in the language of John Coltrane, and therefore wants to be a quester for truth and a quester for justice. I don't even think it's a matter of just ideology. I really don't. I really don't. It would be like apartheid in South Africa. You ain't got to be no leftist to be in solidarity with black folk getting degraded and subjugated and exploited like that. If you're a decent human being with any morality and spiritual sensibility, you're going to be upset. You're going to have a fire inside you to want to fight against it. Same is true with the Palestinian brothers and sisters. And everybody knows, oh my God, if there's a Palestinian occupation of Jewish brothers and sisters, boycott, the divestment, sanctions would be on the cutting edge, and those who supported it would be receiving moral prizes. And I simply say to them that my solidarity, my Jewish brothers and sisters under a Palestinian occupation, I have the same morality and spirituality in regard to Palestinians under a vicious Israeli occupation. Because occupation, exploitation is wrong. You had black folks occupying and subjugating white brothers and sisters. It's wrong. I'm in solidarity with the white brothers. So the white brothers and sisters occupy and exploit black folk. I'm with the black folk. Now, granted, I got a little bias toward black folk because my mom is black and my dad is black and so forth. But all human beings have the potential to be gangsters and thugs. And that's one of the things that a lot of our Jewish brothers and sisters have to recognize. You see, they've been underdogs for so long. We understand it. 2,000 years of hatred, chronic hatred and pogroms and Holocaust. Beyond language in terms of the evil. But you can have an underdog mentality, but be a top dog vis-a-vis Palestinians, and therefore think you have the right to treat them anyway to preserve your way of life. No, that's wrong. And somebody's got to say it. Not one member of the Democratic Party can come forward and say it in a serious way other than our sister from Detroit, Rashida. And a few others, but not too many. And you say, well, how are you going to have a party with no commitment to the truth on these issues? The condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. If you don't allow that suffering to speak, you live in a lie or a half lie. And the same is true with justice. The same is true with justice. Justice, what love looks like in public and deep democracy is what justice looks like in praxis. It's like tenderness is what love feels like in private.
Well said. Well said, Dr. West. One thing I noticed, so I know you and I talked about this before. We talked about like reparations, and I said I felt like Bernie Sanders should have had that a part of his platform. Do you think that you would implement reparations as a part of your platform? And if so, would part of that be cash payments as well?
Well, one, I've been part of reparation committees for over 35 years, going back to the days of the great Randall Robinson, who just passed, as you know, in Virgin Islands. He was at Harvard Law when I was at Harvard College, and we were part and parcel of the takeover of the president's office, given the investments in Angola at that time. And he's the founder of Trans-Africa, primarily committed to reparations. So for over 40 years, I've been fundamentally committed to reparations. Why? Because I'm committed to truth and justice. I think we ought to know what is the truth in terms of what happened to black folk enslaved, Jim Crow, Jane Crow, lynched, discriminated against, degraded. And once you find that truth, how do you repair it? It's like tort law. How do you repair it? That's justice. So it's not any kind of special preference. It's not any kind of black folk having some special assets. No, we want to know the truth, and then justice has to do to how do you repair it. And how do you repair it? What form does it take? It could take cash. It's taking cash in other cases of reparation and so forth, you see. And there we look to the William Dohertys and others who have been thinking about this thing for 30, 35 years. And that's why I actually overlap strongly with Brother Antonio and Sister Yvette with ADOS. And a lot of people, got deep questions about ADOS and so forth. I was there with them the first convention. I'll be there in terms of reparations. Then I go on to tell them, and they've heard me say on many occasions, in my deep support of reparations in terms of those who are descendants of American descendants of slaves, that I don't want any anti-immigrant sensibility. Don't turn those who once called themselves Negroes against those who are from the Caribbean or those who are from Ethiopia and so forth. We have a solidarity, a moral and a spiritual solidarity. We might have distinctive histories. Bob Marley ain't the same as Curtis Mayfield, even though his group imitated Curtis when he came out. But he come out of Jamaica. Jamaica got its own rich, deep history, but they're on the reggae. They ain't on to Choice of Colors. They ain't on to Superfly. So the thing is that we have to understand that we can pursue reparations for African descendants of slaves, even as we embrace fair treatment of immigrants from Mexico and Haiti and Honduras and so on. We don't need to be xenophobic as we also call for our reparations. And that's part of the rich discussion within ADOS, and that's very important. But I just throw that out because a lot of times when you come out for reparations, people will think somehow you're turning your back or somehow putting less value on the suffering of others.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Whereas it's more about a debt that's owed.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the name of Randall Robinson's great book, The Debt. And even Brother Coates. I've had my disagreements with my dear Brother Coates. He's a brilliant brother, but his essay on reparations that was in, I think it was Atlantic magazine a few years ago. Very important statement. All voices can be used and mobilized for good. Very much so.
Dr. West, I'm sure you've seen this. Recently, there has been a lot of information that's come out over the past couple of months about government agencies like the FBI and the CIA obviously being involved in censorship. A lot of that was revealed in the Twitter files with the help of Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, to name a few journalists that handled that project. RFK Jr. has heavily come out to criticize the CIA. I'm sure you've heard his story about what he thinks happened to his father and his uncle. Would you be willing to call out some of those agencies and why or why not? Because when I think of the FBI, immediately I think of Fred Hampton. I think of the other Black Panthers, Black Panther Party. I think of Malcolm X's family came forward recently. They're filing a lawsuit against them in reference to Malcolm X's death. Do you think you'd be willing to call out those government agencies and why or why not?
Well, one, call out and clean up. See, I come out chocolate side of Sacramento, California, Glen Elder, West Family, Shiloh Baptist Church, Black Panther Party right next door. I worked with them for 6 years. Breakfast program, Jamaica Plain, when I was in college in Cambridge. You see, the prison program in Norfolk, the same prison where Malcolm himself was. And meaning what? I haven't got over the murder of Bobby Hutton. Mm-hmm. June 6, 1968, 2 days after Brother Martin was shot down like a dog in Memphis. That's FBI, that's J. Edgar Hoover, that's COINTELPRO. We know that. I'm blessed to travel with Brother Stokely Carmichael, known as Kwame Ture, on many occasions. Had long discussions about what was going on in terms of FBI, and we ain't even got to the CIA and Lumumba yet. You see, so that it's a matter of casting a spotlight, cleaning out, and telling folk, okay, if you're concerned about protecting and serving the people, rather than containing those you view as radicals in order to preserve the empire, then you're in the wrong organization. You're in the wrong. This is what it means to proceed by dismantling empire in the name of the empowerment of those Stone called everyday people. That's what radical democracy is. That's what deep democracy is. And so any structure of domination, and as we know, it comes in a whole lot of different colors. A whole lot of Brother Sharpton the other day. You remember the Tyree funeral? He said, I'm going to tell you what Martin Luther King Jr. saw when he went to the mountaintop. He got up there and he saw Barack Obama. He saw Camilla had no, Brother Sharpton, love you, but get off the crack pipe again. That's not what Martin saw on that mountaintop. No. What did he see, Brother West? I don't know, but he didn't see that. What he probably saw was new pharaohs in new colors, generating forms of accommodation to empire, predatory capitalism, patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, and white supremacy on local, regional, and global levels. He saw African bourgeoisie not responding to the plight of poor working class Africans. He saw the black bourgeoisie turning its back for the most part, being indifferent to those brothers and sisters locked into mass incarceration and decrepit schools, indecent housing, not access to health care, communities shattered with market-driven obsessions with guns and drugs, and unable to even generate the kind of quality relations before they die. That's the kind of brother Martin Luther King Jr. was. That's what he was looking at. And he said, in the midst of that, I still think we gonna make it. Oh my God, Martin, why you believe that? Because I come from a great people who for 400 years have been dealing with chronic hatred and still ditching out love warriors like myself and like Toni Morrison, like James Baldwin and like A. Philip Randolph. We ain't even got to John Coltrane's Love Supreme yet. I come from a people who've been terrorized but never formed a left version, a black version of the Ku Klux Klan would produce Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. I come from a people been so traumatized. And yet here come these wounded healers like Ella Fitzgerald, like Aretha, like Donny Hathaway. And we ain't got to Luther Vandross yet. We ain't got to the dramatics and the delphonics and the emotions. How do these wounded healers and joy spreaders keep coming out of all of this? Martin said, I've been to the mountaintop. That's the best of a great people, and we're losing that. That's what I'm telling folk today. That's the tradition. That if we don't get back to that, we lose everything. We lose American democracy. We lose the ability to have quality relations. We lose the species. We lose the planet. All of the cosmos in so many ways has the blues. We better learn something from the blues people. And I'm not saying it's a matter of skin pigmentation, because again, we got a lot of black gangsters and thugs, and I got a lot of gangsters in me. I'm working it out every day. But I can tell you this, that it's hard to find a people who have not been the leaven in a democratic loaf more so than the Black freedom struggle. And that's a gift to the world. Just like Black music is the greatest artistic breakthrough of the most barbaric century of recorded time, is the 20th century, of our Jewish brothers and sisters, communists, socialists, gays, lesbian, working people, peasants, murdered, killed, 150 million. But here come the blues. Here come jazz. We're going to look at catastrophe. We're going to keep the swing, and we're going to be improvisational enough to keep on keeping on regardless of what the evidence says. What a great tradition. I'm just a little small part of that tradition coming out of Irene B. West and Cliff, my father, made his contribution.
Well said. Last night we did a poll on this show to see who people would vote for. There was over 1,000 votes. You were in first place at 65%. And right behind you is RFK Jr. at 31%. And I'm curious, this got me to thinking, actually, there is some overlap between you and RFK Jr. in reference to the policies that you support. Do you think you would ever be interested in having some type of collaboration with him, maybe on like an anti-war issue, so to speak?
Well, we've already had many collaborations. He and his wonderful family have always been so kind, reached out to me. We used to meet there, Las Vegas. We used to have this wonderful gathering of lawyers concerned about environmental racism and so forth. We were on panels together. I have great love and respect for the brother in his own way. I mean, I was disappointed to see him backing down so quickly. I thought he was even spineless the way he backed away from Brother Roger Waters. Though I said, come on, Brother Kennedy. Now. Hey, you know, Patricia Sullivan's wonderful book on RFK. It's a wonderful book. RFK at the very end, he's trying to be courageous. He'd already put the FBI on Martin, wrong as he can be, but he's trying to bounce back. And he was bouncing back. I say, RFK Jr., you got to take a stand in the face of truth. Don't let these folk tell you you anti-Semitic or somehow you downplaying the plight and predicament of Jewish brothers and sisters. You can love Jewish brothers and sisters and come to their defense, and very much like me say, Jewish security is crucial, indispensable. It's a requisite for any movement forward. But that Jewish security must go hand in hand with Palestinian dignity, with Palestinian justice. It is not either or. So when I saw him in the parade, I said, oh Lord, here come these Democratic Party politicians again. They're confusing improvisation, which is a species of practical wisdom, but still grounded in courage, with opportunism. And opportunism is finding out what you believe after somebody puts pressure on you and pushes you in a certain direction. It's the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. If you're just going to check and see what the climate of opinion is and simply reflect it, rather than be a thermostat and shape it, then you're not really ready. Be the kind of leader for poor and working people that we want. So I've got much to learn from the brother. He's a brilliant brother. We've got a lot of overlap. But I think when you're running for president, you can't let these lobbies, I don't care what they're tied, you can't let these lobbies dictate your judgment. Can you imagine a jazz musician sitting there getting ready to play his trumpet and got to check with somebody else about which notes? Hey, no, get off the stage. Go back home and work on your scales. You know what I mean? That's the standard. That's the standard. So yes, I think I can work very much with my dear brother, RFK Jr. And his family is one that I have always had a fondness for, especially given the suffering, you know, and so on. But when I've seen that, and I haven't heard him really come out for Medicare for all. I mean, there's a number of things that I think I would put pressure on him. But he's got the right orientation in regard to domestic policy. Oh, there's no doubt about that. And he's done a wonderful job as a lawyer. He really has. He's been a force for good as a lawyer dealing with environmental racism.
Well said. I want to ask you about this statement in reference to Ron DeSantis. So some people are, just let you know, some people are criticizing this, and I want to get your opinion, or if you could explain to people what you meant by your statement here. In this article, it says DeSantis revolutionary defense of the classics. And so this was written by you and Jeremy Tate, May 2023. And it's this statement here where it says, that's why Mr. DeSantis' support of classic education has universal merit that transcends partisanship. Education based on values, logic, and discipline isn't Republican, it's timeless. I want to give you the opportunity to explain to people what you mean by that, because some people are criticizing this because of Ron DeSantis' recent actions in reference to education and censorship.
No, I appreciate you giving me that opportunity, because you see, as a jazz man, I try to be very honest and candid about particular issues that I work on and find overlap with folk who I have deep, deep disagreements with. And so Brother Jeremy Tate and I have been working on trying to make sure that classical education, by classical education, I mean from Socrates to Toni Morrison. I mean from Sophocles to James Baldwin. I'm talking about the most powerful formulations of what it means to be human. From Timbuktu to Oxford to Howard to Morehouse to the Sorbonne. Attempts of human beings to come to terms with all of the issues of death and dread and despair and disappointment. And I've seen the dumbing down of education. So what happens is, in those contexts, I do in fact find myself with some deeply conservative folk. And I try to tell them, hey, let's tell the truth now. Let's be honest. When Martin Luther King Jr. is in that Birmingham jail talking about Socrates, he is understanding the relation of Socrates, who also died of the hemlock after being in jail, to his situation. And so when it comes to DeSantis, that's the 2% of the time I would agree with him, because he indeed brought in the classic education test to accent that classical education. I have a deep commitment to classical education to make sure we sustain the highest levels. And it's always cuts across cultures, cuts across civilizations. It's African, it's indigenous peoples, it's Latin American, it's European, it's Asian, and so forth. 98% of the time, he's a xenophobe. He's a cowardly manipulator of various cultural wars. And he himself, he's Ivy League trained and acting like he come out of some proletarian context or something. I said, wait a minute, brother DeSanto. Why don't you be honest with yourself? But he's running for president. He learned much from Trump, and Trump has just helped gangsterize the whole terrain. It was already corrupt, but he's now gangsterized it in that way. And so DeSantis feels as if he has to play that role. And so 98% of the time, I have deep disagreements. Now, I must say the title, I think, was ridiculous. I didn't choose the title. That was the Wall Street Journal. Brother Jeremy called me up and said he didn't like the title either. But we're always working on classical education. Same is true with my dear brother, Robbie George, where I have very deep disagreements. And yet at the same time, you know, I got a deep love for the brother. And so we work together on a variety of issues. And then we fight on a whole host of other issues as well. And, you know, I don't mind being pushed against the wall by folk who think I need to be all on their side. Well, see, I don't proceed like that. I don't proceed. It's like looking at Clarence Thomas, and I agree with him about 99% of the time. But when I see Clarence Thomas, I still see a beautiful black man aesthetically. He reminds me of my grandfather. You see, a beautiful black man can be a force against justice, against freedom, as I understand it. So I have profound disagreements with him. We fight. I've never fought, you know, physically or nothing, you see. But when I see him, I don't first see just all of the, you know, ugly things associated with his policies. I can still stay in contact with his humanity, even as I know he's my political foe and my ideological enemy. And that's just how I proceed. That's how I choose to be in the world. Everybody doesn't have to do that, you know. Everybody doesn't have to do that. But that's just how I choose to be. That's the kind of horn I'm blowing. Or like Mary Lou Williams, that's the kind of piano I'm playing. And I'm going to go down like that. You know what I mean? I'm going to go down like that. That's how I was raised by Irene and Clifton and Shiloh Baptist Church and the Panther Party. I've never a member of the Panther Party because I'm revolutionary Christian. You know, they atheistic and things. So we used to have our wonderful discussions about religion as an opium of the people and the way in which they had a preacher every week who was selling out the people. And they were right. Many of those preachers did. Ain't no doubt about that. I said, why don't you get some lawyers and pharmacists and doctors up there? No, we're going to focus on the preachers because they're so important in our community. And then what happens? Well, when they had the breakfast program, they go to the black churches. Why? Because there's a prophetic slice of the black church that's in solidarity with the Panthers. I said, yes, go to St. Augustine. Go to Allen Temple, or J. Alfred Smith, who was Huey Newton's pastor. And who was Huey Newton's father? Reverend Walter Newton, pastor of Bethel Baptist Church, Monroe, Louisiana. Baddest black man in the city. Police wouldn't touch him. His son, just like him. Ooh, interesting. Very fascinating. The very source of your strength can come out of an institution you have deep disagreements with in terms of its beliefs. That's exactly right. Very much so.
You're better than me, Dr. West. When I look at Clarence Thomas, I see Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks.
I can understand because that and there's an element of strong element of truth in that. But you can imagine also when you see Clarence Thomas, if he looks exactly like your uncle, you say, ooh, I got to really distinguish between Uncle Johnny and old Uncle Remus Clarence, because what his face and his the way he proceeds is something that has a resonance within my own cultural formation. See? Even though politically and ideologically I'm going at him tooth and nail, but you see the point I'm making. It's a matter of finding something that allows you to stay in contact with the humanity of others, so that it leaves you open to some sense of possibility, so that you're never ever feeling as if you're fatalistic about anybody. You see, if Elijah Muhammad were fatalistic about Malcolm and Malcolm little remained the gangster that he was, we never would have had Malcolm X.
Mm.
Elijah loved him into Malcolm X. And then he had to outgrow Elijah and continue to become one of the greatest freedom fighters of the 20th century. You see what I mean? But if we gave up on Malcolm Little, no Malcolm X, well, we need Malcolm. I can't conceive of myself without Malcolm X. No, I don't exist. That's like trying to conceive of myself without Fannie Lou Hamer. I can just hear this little light of mine and Fannie Lou singing all the time. They try to beat her down and she just keep on coming back with all of her style and her smile and her song. Yes, that's my kind of human being and freedom fighter.
Well, so Dr. West, you're running through the People's Party. There have been a number of issues with the People's Party, as I'm sure you know. There have been allegations of sexual harassment against Nick Brana, who's the chair of the People's Party. I interviewed Nick Brana and his accuser, Zineb, on this show as well. There have been issues that have been released from former volunteers. Actually, they've come forward and said that there were allegations of racism in reference to the People's Party in a Slack group. And there have also been complaints about mismanagement of finances on Nick Brana's end, and as well as his father. So I understand, every party has its issues, but I'm curious, why did you decide to run through the People's Party, and how do you see this party evolving going forward?
No, I appreciate that question. I just felt we had to find a third way. The two-party system is a major impediment for the empowering of poor and working people. The Green Party, I have great respect for. I have tremendous love for Brother Ralph Nader in terms of his example in public service and so forth. I supported him when he ran 2004. Sister Jill Stein, I also supported him. Brother Ajumu Baraka, I mean, he's my brother. He ran vice president of the Green Party with Jill Stein, so that I have some connection, but I'm not a member of it. I have no real sense of what it would actually even be like to go through the process. I didn't see any other independent institutions. I was on the ground floor of the founding of the People's Party when they broke from Brother Bernie in 2016. I was there with my dear sister Nina Turner and so many others. You pointed out last night that beautiful picture that you had. And so I was thoroughly convinced that the People's Party certainly struck me as an institutional vehicle for me to be able to promote a truth and pursue a truth and a justice. But you're right, I was certainly aware of the ugly moments and aware of the faults and aware of some of the charges. Now, I don't like to adjudicate in public about guilt and innocence and so forth. I really don't. But I want to take very, very seriously, any claims about sexual harassment and what have you, or about racism and so forth and so on. But I was still convinced that the People's Party can be an institutional vehicle for something so much bigger than those particular things without trying to erase or eliminate them. And so with the campaign, I said, well, let us embark and see what the Lord has in store, see what kind of history we can make. And I do hope and pray that people give the campaign a chance to be the kind of force for good that it can be. And I wouldn't be running without the People's Party reaching out. So I acknowledge that very much so. Nick Brown is the founder of the party. I acknowledge that, but he's a cracked vessel, just like I'm a cracked vessel and everybody else. And all of us have to be accountable. All of us have to be accountable. But I just hope that the powers that be, especially the corporate media, especially the neoliberal elites, they're going to find anything they can to try to bring you down. Any distraction that they can. The whole culture of neoliberalism is a culture of mass distraction. So you won't talk about Wall Street power. You won't talk about Pentagon power. You won't really hit police power. Even if you have some demonstrations and have some symbolic bills, the Democratic Party has never been fundamentally serious about ending mass incarceration. It helped create it in a fundamental way, including it. Joe Biden himself, he's the architect of that crime against humanity. That's what mass incarceration is. I've taught in prisons for 41 years. It's a crime against humanity. And the question becomes, when you understand it in that way, what you going to do about it? Well, Democratic Party has kept on moving. Big tech, globalization, obsession with markets, all the different contexts for luxury and all of the cycling of the status and spectacle, and the masses of people. 60% of Americans living check by check, month by month. What happens to their suffering? That's why I'm also going straight into Trump country, straight into it. And I'm going to tell those white brothers and sisters, y'all are vanilla brothers and sisters who are catching hell. You're wounded, you're scarred. Why are you following a neo-fascist Pied Piper? Why don't you confront the most powerful rather than scapegoat the most vulnerable? Why would you be cowardly to want to attack me, gay brothers, lesbian sisters, Jews, Muslims, Arabs, trans women, and then side with a neo-fascist gangster with Brother Trump? Please, let us present to you an alternative. Well, we hate Biden, not hating person. We hate the professional managerial class. They're arrogant. They're condescending. They are arrogant. They are condescending. New York Times, Washington Post, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, they specialize, not in all of them, but specialize in creating a culture of arrogance and condescension vis-a-vis working people. The mass majority of Americans never go to college, never set a foot in college. You see, well, that's in a democracy. You're embracing everybody. And I begin with the least of these. I begin with the poor and working class, you see. So we're going straight into Trump country because, as I said before, you can't defeat fascism with milquetoast neoliberalism. Never. All you're going to have is just a little caretaker government every 4 years that's postponing the collapse of democracy because the fascists sooner or later will take over. You got to create alternative visions, alternative passion with infrastructure and organization so you can rechannel the frustrations and the rage so they don't follow neo-fascist Pied Pipers. They follow radically democratic servants who are humble enough to try to convince them and persuade them, also bring power and pressure, but don't have a minute of any patience with hatred of Black people, of brown people, or immigrants.
So one of the things that I mentioned was mismanagement of finances, and I know this wasn't on your end, your responsibility, right. But one of the concerns that has been brought my way from people is that they are cautious of, if let's say they do donate like to your campaign, because you're aligned with the People's Party and they've heard about issues of mismanagement of finances before. Some people are cautious that if that money gets into the hands of Nick Brana and his father, some people are concerned that it's not going to be used in the proper way. Again, I know this isn't on you, but other people have told me that they would be more likely to support if Nick Brana were to step down as chair of this party. How can you reassure people that something like that would not happen, that those funds would not go in a different direction?
No, I appreciate the question too. I mean, one is that we've got a board is going to be a board that's even stronger with towering figures like Brother Chris Hedges, who I have tremendous love and respect for. Sister Medea Benjamin, I have tremendous love and respect for. These are tried and true freedom. I'm just mentioning two, you see, who constitute a mechanism of overseeing. But most importantly, in a campaign, you got to count for every penny. Yes. By law. See, that's a very different situation with a party. But in a campaign, you have to count for every penny. So people shouldn't have any worry in that regard. But I do hear what you're saying. And I just think that, we've got to somehow, on the one hand, speak to it strong enough so that people will then be able to focus on what we're really about, which is trying to raise our voices, be motion, momentum, movement, and campaign to try to bring our critiques to bear on the empire, the militarism abroad, all the crucial issues that we talk about, the greed of Wall Street, trying to seriously defend the rights of trade unions. We got this summer major strikes coming up. It's going to be very clear, exposing which side people are on. Be right there. Let the working folk know of all colors, all genders, all sexual orientation. We are with you. Biden, where are you? Railroad strike. Where are you, Brother Joe? You're on the wrong side. And that's just one small example of that. Same would be true in terms of ecological collapse that's happening right now. We see the results in part in our northeastern cities and northeastern regions and so on. You see, and I mean, you know, there's just so many variety of different issues, but I do always connect foreign policy with domestic policy. It's very important to connect the militarizing of other parts of the world in Cop City, the militarizing of police, the militarizing of schools, the militarizing of our civil society, and how that reinforces the gangsterizing. And when you gangsterize a society, it's hard to generate trust and solidarity. And you end up with survival of the slickest. And the wealthy always went out with a divide and conquer strategy so that poor people and working people are at each other's throats as the top 1% that has wealth equivalent to the bottom 90%. We got 3 individuals with wealth equivalent to the bottom 50%. But that, if that's not morally obscene, I don't know what is.
So one of the issues for third party and independent candidates is ballot access. Like, so everyone we know, like Jill Stein had to go through this, et cetera. With the People's Party, it appears, last I checked, they had ballot access, I think maybe in Florida and Virginia. Some people are asking, you know, what is the strategy? Is the strategy running through the People's Party to run a write-in campaign where people will write in your name on the ballot if you don't get ballot access in all the other states? Or is the strategy more so to build a third party movement to get the ground like going and then open it up to other options? So I think that's one of the biggest concerns for people is just how do we vote for Dr. West if the People Party doesn't have ballot access the way that the Green Party does?
Absolutely. And one of the great contributions of Ralph Nader was, remember, he began in February and still was able to get over 40 states. So that was February right before the election in November. We're starting now 16 months ahead. You see, so when we look at 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, some of these states, 3,000 signatures, 4,000 signatures, 6,000 signatures. Once you get your campaign moving and your folk in place, you get those signatures and the states begin to kick in. So it's not static or stationary, right? Where we begin now is just 2 or 3 days into, and we out of the blocks, as you know. Ooh, we out of the blocks fast. I didn't think we'd be out of the blocks like this in terms of the impact, coverage, range, and so forth and so on. But now you had to translate that institutionally and infrastructurally, state by state. And what you need are those folk out there, volunteers and others, gaining those signatures. And that's what we're planning to do day by day, week by week. But most importantly, you know, it's a matter of choosing what kind of human being you want to be from your mama's womb to tomb. And that's not just a matter of winning overnight. This is not push button strategy. This is not a boomtown panacea. When you choose to live a certain life, where you have a genuine love of folk catching hell, then you pace yourself. You're a long distance runner and you know you can't do it by yourself. You have to have comrades, friends, companions, loved ones. So you constitute communities. And if you're lucky, you can create a major movement. Why? Because the powers that be will do everything they can to crush it. But the powers that be are mighty, they're not almighty. That's the history of the species. When they try to wipe out and suffocate all the love, all the justice, all the integrity, all the generosity, it just keeps seeping through the cracks. It's like Tupac's mama who wrote that wonderful book, The Rose That Came Through the Crack in the Concrete. Here come little Tupac. What you got to say, Tupac? So many tears. Woo! Uh-huh. Thug life, so many tears. My voice will be heard. It cannot be snuffed out. That's just one grand example of freedom fighters of all colors who confront domination and say, domination, you are mighty, but you're not almighty. You will not have the last word. And sometimes all it is just, dear mama, so many tears.
Mm-hmm. So one of the questions I had in reference to the Green Party, because obviously this is another question that a lot of people have been asking. The Green Party, while it has its issues too, there were allegations of the Green Party rigging their primary for Howie Hawkins. It seems that there is some type of a rift with the Howie Hawkins faction of that party. I am curious. Did the Green Party reach out to you and ask you to run for president under the Green Party for 2024?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. But they shouldn't have. They shouldn't have. I had a wonderful dialogue with Brother Howard. I've known him for many, many years when he ran before. And as I say, I mean, I just have a great respect for different comrades. You know what I mean? It gets me in trouble. I mean, you got the Revolutionary Communist Party, my dear brother Carl Dix. I've been to jail so many times we can't count. My sister Sarah Taylor. He's my brother and she's my sister. You know, and even Brother Ovakian, you know, even Maoist, he running the Revolutionary Communist Party. When I'm in prison, their folk are in prison. When we in the streets together. When we go to jail, we in jail together. We have deep disagreements on things, but we got a love for poor people and working people, you see. And so I'm not one to be running around scared of associating with different groups and so forth. I'm a free black man. I don't have any of these problems of being able to connect with other groups and tell them where I disagree and where I agree and so forth and so on. You have to be able to be in anybody's house, White House, crack house, your mama's house, preserve your integrity, honesty, and decency, and be the force for good you are in whatever context. And everybody falls on their faces. But so I'm not one to ever, as you can imagine, I'd never trash, a Green Party, a People's Party, a Revolutionary Communist Party, Angela Davis's old Communist Party when I first met her. I was never in love with the Soviet Union. I was glad they supported decolonization and so forth. But no, I'm not one. We're going to treat our Jewish brothers and sisters unfair in the Soviet Union. I'm coming at you. If you're going to repress dissenting voices in the Soviet Union, I'm coming at you. But I love the fact he supported Nelson Mandela. Oh, yes. I can agree with that part of the Soviet Union when it was in place and we had the old Communist Party, you see. And I learned from, the Paul Robeson and W.B. Du Bois's and the Claudia Joneses, the Mary Barakas and so many others who were communists. But I'm not a communist, brother. I'm just a revolutionary Christian trying to love my crooked neighbor with my crooked heart.
Well said, Dr. West. Quick question about foreign policy. Ukraine war and the conflict between Israel and Palestine. If you were president, what would you do in reference to those two particular situations?
For the Ukraine war, I'd do everything I could to stop it. Ceasefire. I'd sit down with the various leaders from Ukraine, Russia, and China, Turkey, those particular leaders who are interested in the possibility of a ceasefire. Too much suffering going on. In going into the dialogue, I would be very clear. It's a crime against humanity in terms of the invasion of Iraq by the Russian Empire. Be very clear about that. No doubt. At the same time, expansion of NATO, provocation of the Russian Empire. Each must take responsibility. We're leading toward nuclear war. Too much suffering already. And more arms, more support generates more war. I have deep disagreements with Biden and the Democratic Party in that regard. He come back and say, oh, does that mean that the Ukrainians mean nothing to you? Quit lying about me. Not at all. Not at all. I don't want one more killed at all. Israel, Palestine, understand, as I said, you got the clash. Jewish security, Palestinian dignity. Jewish safety, Palestinian justice. How are you going to speak to both at the same time? Well, the first thing you do is dismantle occupation. First thing you do is pull back on militarizing any conflict because Israeli defense forces have been excessive and running wild in killing innocent Palestinian brothers and sisters. And if it were the other way around, there would be worldwide calls for boycotts and sanctions, and rightly so. We must never leave our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters feeling as if they are thoroughly abandoned as their children are being killed. 551 of them in 51 days, and not one major Democrat or Republican say a mumbling word. That's morally obscene. And when you have that kind of indifference, don't think that it's not manifest in your domestic policy. Poor people also perishing, hardly noticed in that sense. So what do? You sit down with Israel. You have received all of this money, military support, and so forth. If you do not dismantle the occupation, you will see that support called into question. And if you do not ensure that the human rights are protected of those Palestinians within Israel, you will see similar kinds of action. And I meet with the Palestinians and say, you also have responsibility. I don't have a minute to put up with anti-Jewish hatred. If I see this kind of ugly characterization of Jews that are similar to what has been the characterization of Jews negatively for 2,000 years, as president, I will call it into question. But then I'll bring in the legacy of Edward Said, who is himself as Palestinian as any of our Palestinian brothers and sisters in the West Bank and Gaza, and say, we must create a culture and modes of perception in which you view even your Jewish enemies as fellow human beings. We know what they've done to you for all these years. There's no way you can create a future for your children if you do not ensure that you'll be able to either come together or, at least in the language of Albert Einstein, coexist in a binational social experiment. Federation is a whole host of different forms of it. The two-state solution once was trotted out, is now undercut with all the Israeli settlements. It's now impossible.
Right.
It's now
Right.
impossible.
That was something I was trying to explain to Marianne, is just that when you say two-state solution, the Palestinian Network did explain to those of us, the rest of us at RBN, that like this is not a feasible option for the Palestinian people because they're in the minority, they have less resources, and it's just like almost the equivalent of separate but equal, which did not work in the United States. It was separate, but it definitely wasn't equal. So I know it's
that's true. That's true. But also the land. You see, the land has been taken over by hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers.
Yeah.
And so you don't even have the basis of the land anymore. When we were talking about this, Edward Said and I used to pick it in front of the New York Times just to get the use of the word occupation. They call it disputed territories. Disputed territories, y'all are occupying. And then they continued expanding. Democratic Party, Republican Party endorsing, expanding. It's more money and expanding and becoming more militarized and so forth, you see. So that's, unfortunately, now that's gone. Now, you know, when I hear this talk about, well, you know, we got to push our Jewish brothers and sisters to the sea. You see, I have no patience with that kind of language either. See, that's not a loving language in terms of a people who themselves have so often felt abandoned in a Gentile world with no one caring. That's what Hitler was about. That's what they felt, you see. And so the question becomes, how do you engage in creating a coordinated, coexisting binational state of federation or whatever it is with equal security, equal justice? We're not talking about Israeli state that's got all the ammunition and all the power and the Palestinian Pakistan that's dependent on it. No, those days are over too. Palestinian dignity means, in fact, Palestinian voices raised to shape their destiny based on a fair treatment of land and resources. Now, what is the definitive resolution? Nobody has that. we have to begin taking steps. Now we're taking steps in the opposite direction. And as you have neo-fascism escalating on a very high level, even given the limited Jewish liberalism that has been in place, now you just got outright Jewish gangsters who are in office in Israel. And thank God you've got a number of very decent Jewish brothers and sisters in Israel who are trying to call it into question. We'll see whether they have enough power, because it's almost Trump. It's fascinating to see these Democrats, the Charles Schumers and others, talk about Trump like a dog, but can't talk about Netanyahu like a dog. And you say, hey,
Right.
you're a hypocrite. You're a hypocrite, man. It's hard to take you seriously. If the American neo-fascist becomes the demon, but the Israeli neo-fascist becomes Israel has a right to survive.
Right.
Hey, let's be serious about this. And yet that's the stance of the Democratic Party. They ought to be ashamed. And the black politicians who go along with it, they ought to be ashamed.
Dr. West, how would you deal with groups like AIPAC, which have been basically raising money to push out progressive politicians that have spoken out, like Rashida Tlaib? AIPAC raised money against her to try to push her out from re-election. There were candidates that run, like Maxwell Frost, changed his position on Israel and Palestine, I think, so that this would not happen to him. How would you handle organizations or PACs like AIPAC that raise so much money to try to prevent voices like yours from getting in?
Well, I would never isolate Israeli lobbies or Jewish brothers and sisters or any other particular lobby. I would come up with campaign finance laws that would hold across the board. See, I would never treat lobbies tied to Jewish issues different than corporate lobbies tied to, like, the Chamber of Commerce and so forth. All of these are lobbies. You got tons and tons of lobbies that are out there. AIPAC is one particular lobby. We have to have a campaign finance law that holds across the board, that includes the fact that they can't give all this money to Sister Nina Turner's opponent 1 week before in order to push her out because she's a progressive voice, even in a decrepit, corrupt Democratic Party. Nina Turner's serious sister. And we've got some folk in the Democratic Party who are still trying to hold on, and God bless them. I'm just not convinced as they are that the Democratic Party will ever be a major force other than the corporate wing that shapes its destiny, you see. But I mean, people can disagree with me. You know, I don't have a monopoly on truth or nothing. Like I said with Brother Bernie, he jumped on Biden right away, and I thought he was wrong and things, but I love the brother. You know, he's been a force for good. We're going a different way. That's all. We're going a different way.
So another question that I have for you in reference to Bernie Sanders. Bernie had started a movement, and then, after he lost in 2016, 2020, the rest of us just kind of stood around like, what do we do now? Because Bernie is not a part of this movement anymore. He's kind of left his movement. In the event you build a strong movement through the People's Party, through your campaign, in the event that you do not win, I think what some people may want to know is, will Dr. West still be around for that on the ground grassroots momentum that was built up? So, for example, if we have rallies, anti-war rallies, or Medicare for All marches, would Dr. West still be involved and participate? Or would you kind of go the way of Bernie Sanders and say, okay, I lost, that's it, I'm out?
Well, I mean, Bernie's not out, though. He's running that committee, which is powerful, but it's within the auspices of the neoliberal Democratic Party. But he's still out there fighting within those constraints. It's just very narrow constraints. Myself, I'm much more tied to movements. I would not be inside of the system in that sense. I would still be anti-imperialist. I'd be critical of predatory capitalism. I'd be in solidarity with my sisters wrestling with patriarchy, deep solidarity with precious trans, who are the most vulnerable right now in terms of the vicious attacks coming at them, as well as gay brothers and lesbian sisters. And that's just going to be the case as long as I'm breathing. Now, I might be walking with a stick, and I can't break dance no more. I can't move as fast as I used to. But as long as I'm breathing, I'm going to be at those rallies. You got no standing rock. I may have to get a special little way of getting there and get there late, a little CP time. But I'm going to get there because I want to be with my people. My people are people who are suffering, oppressed people, you see. So no matter what, I would be somewhere in that struggle. But that's been my life for 55 years, going back to high school when Martin was shot and we shut down the high schools in Sacramento, in the chocolate side of town, and insisted they have Black studies. Glenn Jordan and Kenneth Jones, the president's mother just passed, and Melissa Lawson, all chocolate folk. And we vowed, we made a covenant with each other. We were going to be faithful unto death. And each one of us have been in our own distinctive way. Not because we so good, but because we want to bear witness to the love that's been poured into us. And that's what Malcolm, that's what Ella did. That's precisely what Stevie Wonder. That's precisely what Curtis Mayfield, Nina Simone, Gil Scott-Heron, they poured that love into us. Donny Hathaway, we shall never forget you. Watch us in our witness. That's what it's all about. Then you go to the grave with a smile on your face with style.
Well said, Dr. West. All right, Dr. West, I have a few more, I think 3 more questions for you.
Sure, absolutely.
Shama Sawan started this organization called Workers Strike Back. I'm sure you're familiar with Shama, where she's trying to organize, workers across the country and unionize these workers. And I think the first step is Amazon, from what I understood, trying to unionize them across the country. Do you foresee either yourself, your campaign, or the People's Party trying to collaborate in some way, shape, or form with Workers Strike Back and unionizing the people?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would even use a stronger word than collaborate. Genuine solidarity at its deepest level. They have a strike, be there. If they're moving against the powers that be, raise voice and body, be there. My dear sister from Seattle, we go all the way back because when she first came in, she had these major forces against her because you got so many of the powers that be, big tech there. She's been magnificent. I have tremendous respect for her. And as you probably know, we were able to push through the anti-caste discrimination. Mm-hmm. Why? Because our precious Dalit brothers and sisters have the same value as each and every one of us. Thank God she was willing to do that. Now California, they're trying to push it through with Sister T and Brother Suraj and a whole host of other Dalit brothers and sisters who I'm blessed to work with. But when it comes to the trade union movement, there can be no major move toward fundamental transformation of our society without the trade union movement playing a very important role. Because the predatory capitalist processes obsessed with profit have to be targeted. It's just that it can't be a trade union movement that is so narrowly reformist that it's only concerned about concessions and unconcerned about other crucial issues of injustice as opposed to just their wages. They have to have a broader view, and my dear sister understands that very well. So my answer to the question is absolutely yes.
Awesome. Then the other question I have, 2 more questions I have for you. You mentioned Chris Hedges and you mentioned Medea Benjamin.
Yes.
Do you have an idea who your campaign manager would be? And if so, can you share that information with us? And what do you think Chris and Medea's roles would be in reference to your campaign?
Well, no, I appreciate that, because the thing is that Brother Nick Brown, founder of the party, has been leader of the party, even given all the different charges against him and what have you. And I still understand him playing a very, very important role in terms of his history and his present. And so we have to be able to hit the issues of the charges against him head on. And it's true, that he brought it to me as campaign manager in that sense. And so it's not going to be a question of me in any way trying to, what would be the right way, trying to act as if he has not been indispensable in preserving the party, and I would not have a campaign without the party and his invitation. But the question becomes, how do we collectively speak to these particular challenges? And how do we ensure, most importantly, that it is not a distraction from the people's business? We keep the focus on the suffering and the resistance and the need for institutional and infrastructural development. You see? So that's how I respond to that particular question. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm a little bit concerned with if it were me, I would make Chris Hedges your campaign manager.
Mm,
And if it
mm,
were me, I would be a little questionable about Medea because I feel like you
mm.
can't be in two places at one time.
Well,
Either
she's such an activist. She's in so many places. That's true. That's
she
true.
is, but I mean, you can't be at a squad event one night and saying hanging out with the squad on Twitter, and then at the
I
same
see.
time trying to work with the third party route. For me, you got to pick one, Medea. So you can't do both because then I'm kind of looking at you sideways. You working with the Democratic Party or you working outside the Democratic Party? So that's me. I've had a lot of experience with people infiltrating groups, Dr. West. So I just get worried when I hear that.
I see what you're saying. No, but I think you also have to consider, my dear sister, you tell me what you think, that if you are improvisational and if you're a person of integrity, then you can come to terms with even bourgeois Democratic Party politicians on particular issues. You see, I can spend time with Brother Ro Khanna when it comes to Medicare for all because he's down for it. That doesn't mean that I'm part of the neoliberal network, the Democratic Party. Doesn't mean that even he has a certain kind of progressive, which is overweighted with the corporate wing. But if it's Medicare for all, then I'm with him. Let's go with it, Ro. And same would be true with Rashida on Palestine. I'm not going to stay away from her because she's in the Democratic Party and she's speaking the truth about Palestinian suffering. So there have to be ways in which we can come together on issues. I can come together with Barbara Lee in California. We go back 40 years with Ron Dellums and so forth. You see, I think that she, in many instances, had progressive voices. We invited her to Princeton when she had death threats when she was the only one that voted against the Iraqi war. That's serious business. She put her life on the line as a member of the Democratic Party on that issue. Not a member of the party. She's a member of the party. Ooh, we different. We still very different. But you see what I mean? I think there's ways in which we have to be able to move improvisationally on different issues because these issues affecting the people. And when you have a deep focus on the people, you got to try to zero in on their needs. It could be food, it could be healthcare, it could be quality education. And if there's folk who are contributing to that, who have different ideological groups that they're a part of, you can still fuse with them. But does that make sense to you?
It does. I get nervous about the Democratic Party co-opting movements.
No,
I get nervous.
Oh, yes. That's very true. I'll give a good example. The great William Barber himself and Sister Thea Harris, Poor People's Campaign. You see that's so crucial. My beloved wife Anahita and I were there for 10 hours. The Poor People's Campaign, one because I love Brother Barber. I met him when he was a graduate student at Duke and Divinity School, and he's been courageous. And people say, well, sometimes he's tied to certain elements of the Democratic Party. Absolutely. He's working in the Black community. He's working in the progressive community. And you got some folk on those issues that they're pushing, but they're unable to push it through the party because the party's not making poverty a priority. How many politicians showed up at the Poor People's Campaign? We were there for 8 hours. It looks like the number of Black folk in the National Hockey League. That's how many congressmen were and women were actually there. So they made it clear. They made it clear. But that doesn't mean that he won't have some openness with certain progressive Democrats who are trying to raise issues as it relates to hitting the child poverty, hitting poverty as a whole. We saw the same thing with Marion Wright Edelman. It's one of the great prophetic figures of the 20th century coming out of Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer's movement with the Children's Defense Fund. For almost 50 years, she's raising the issue of child poverty. She had to deal with certain Democrats because she's trying to get some policies, but she was not co-opted. You see, she kept the focus where it belonged so that she could see where they would get cowardly and spineless. She could see, but she could put pressure on it. She could try to push and then get pushed back. That's what I mean by being improvisational, but you're absolutely right. The Democratic Party can co-opt you, and social movements do often die when they find themselves incorporated within the Democratic Party.
All right, Dr. West, two questions. If you were president, this issue with Julian Assange, he's in Belmarsh. We do not, I personally, as an Assange activist, I do not want him to be extradited back to the United States because I think that is going to be a death sentence for him. What would you do in reference to the issue with Julian Assange? Would you free Julian Assange on day one?
Pardon immediately. Snowden, 2. Mubi Abu Jamal, 2. Minnie, Leonard, the whole, we can go right across the dot. Sada Shakur, come on home, sister. Come on home, if you want to. If you want to, you see. And I say that in the name of truth and justice. People say, oh, Brother West doing that because he's got a black bias or a bias toward indigenous people. Well, I do love them, but no. I'm talking about those who've been treated unjustly, those who've been incarcerated unjustly. H. Brown right now in Arizona, who's Iman Amin now. There's a whole host of them. It wouldn't be just black folk. There's a whole host of political prisoners in the history in jail right now who should never have been there, who ought to be released immediately. Now, I know that's going to create all kind of mess. And I'm going to tell them, that's right. I'm a funk master. I ain't going to deodorize, sanitize, or sterilize any of these policies. This is looked at from the vantage point of the suffering of poor and working people whose heroes are often unjustly incarcerated and have to pay a price beyond measure. And the least I could do if I got access to power is to give them a few years so they could spend time with their loved ones. Give them a few years of what it's like to get outside of that prison. When I saw Brother Mumi Abu Jamal, me and Brother Chris Hedges went there and spent 7 hours with him with the great James Cone, the founder of Black Liberation Theology. He was a freer man on death row than many folk walking the streets freely. That's the kind of spiritual strength he had. And he still had love in his heart, deep love in his heart, just like Emmett Till's mama. I don't have a minute to hate. I'll pursue justice for the rest of my life. That's what's still in the heart and soul of Mumi Abu Jamal. It's Julian and Ed Snowden and the others who reveal so many of the war crimes of the American empire. They ought to be acknowledged as those who've contributed to truth and justice. They ought not to be marginalized and demonized the way the corporate media and other elites do that.
That's right. All right, Dr. West, a final question. When all this is said and done and the cows come home, in the event you do not win, are you going to tell your supporters to support Joe Biden because we don't want to end up with a Trump-like figure? Or are you going to tell your supporters you need to protest, do a protest vote?
I'll tell you, I'm in it to win it. And I'm in it to go to the end. There's no doubt about it. If the Democrats want to win, then they need to put out a candidate that can steal my thunder. And if not, it's clear that they are willing. They're willing to think that they own other people's votes, that people are forced to vote for a Biden with all of the militarism, all of the legacy of mass incarceration, all of the turns away the poor people. I give Biden credit. He cut child poverty in half. It's a beautiful thing. The pandemic and the relief bill. But what happens? It expires. Child poverty goes right back again. Lets me know no serious commitment to it. No serious commitment to it. That's what burns me up, you see. And so in that regard, let them put forward a quality both candidate and quality program. Steal my thunder. Because I'm going to go down speaking my truth and promoting justice. Now, I know you got people, oh, Brother West was Brother Lance Tribe of Harvard. It's just nothing but ego vanity. Oh, so now all that I do is reduce the ego vanity. I'll be dang. Isn't that something? Appreciate the effort, Brother Tribe. But when you're bearing witness to something bigger than just choice between freaking frack and Tweedledee and Tweedledum, when you're concerned about the folk who suffer under your Democratic Party regime, then you have a different way of looking at the world. If you're looking at the world through a neoliberal lens, then it's the lesser evil solely. And there's some insights there. I'm not denying some of the insights. But if you're looking at it in a deeper way in the long run, in terms of the fascism sooner or later taking over and the poor folks still pushed out with austerity programs as the military expands, then your very neoliberalism is contributing to the fascism. And when you look at it from the vantage point of that precious West Bank baby, that bomb is still being dropped, no matter what party is in the White House. That's my vantage point.
And I totally hear you, Dr. West, but I think the thing is like, in the end, though, because we there's no guarantees. Like, obviously, like there's no guarantee that you would win. In the end, would you tell your supporters to vote for Joe Biden? Like, I can tell you, like, for myself, if it were me, I would tell them not to do it. I would tell them this is not how we're going to get a third party movement going. If you continue to support the establishment Democrats, at some point we have to break away.
You've got to be able to decide that the alternative that you're promoting is one that is worthy, even if it looks as if it generates those consequences that people view as inconceivable. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And that's exactly where I stand. There's no doubt about it.
All right, Dr. West. Well, I said
thank you so very much. I know we had a good time. How long did we go today?
I don't know. I think I'm over your. I'm definitely over your time. But
no, but that's fine. That's fine. It's just a blessing to be in conversation. As I told you, my dear wife and I, Anahita, we watch you every night, and we're informed. We are illuminated, and you just stay strong. And God bless your family and your loved ones. You know.
Thank you, Dr. West. Good luck. And I will say I applaud you for running outside the duopoly. I know it takes a lot of courage to do so, and I'm just glad that somebody is stepping up to the plate.
Well, you stay strong now.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Appreciate
Bye.
you. Uh-huh.
All right, guys. I know I have a lot of comments here to go to. We have 3 more stories that I'm going to discuss tonight as well. But welcome. I hope you learned some things tonight, guys. So thank you so much for hanging with me. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you guys so much for that. That helps me out with the algo. And I think I'm going to do the thumbnail, the rundown of the thumbnail stories. And then I may need to take just like maybe like a 5-minute break really quick, Eric. But these are the stories that we're going to discuss tonight. Let me go ahead and share that thumb. Bum, bum, bum. All right, tonight we are discussing, Cornel West was just here, obviously, to talk about his campaign. We're also going to discuss Aaron Mate reveals FBI. So this is a huge story in reference to Ukraine, the FBI, and social media censorship. We're also going to discuss Tucker Carlson's Twitter show. That was a huge deal if you didn't know. And Mexico eyes Brics. It looks like Mexico is getting closer and closer to that moment. So we're going to dive into that. And I'm going to quickly shout out patrons. Eric, I'll let you come in after I'm done with this. And we got a lot of super chats, I know. And then I'll be back. I just got to take a quick 5-minute break. Thank you so much for everyone who is a Sabby patron. Appreciate all your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And I want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. I love this name, Capitalism Survivor. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. Quick 5-minute break for me, Eric's going to come on and read this. I think those starred super chats, and I will be right back and we'll dive right into the other stories.
All right, here we go. Let me check out. Looks like I got pretty good levels here. All right. I thought that was a great interview. I think we all learned a lot. I thought he gave really good answers, and I thought he was really very knowledgeable, about all the topics, and I was impressed by it. All right, let's go into super chats because we got a ton of super chats. Apologies to as far as like people who had certain questions that they put in that they wanted to ask. We had limited time, and so yeah, but I thought she got a really good set of questions in there. Let's see. All right, thanks for this one, Marvin Vargas. How Dr. West going to deal with APAC, PAC, and farmers? And I think, the basic answer that he gave was he's basically, definitely into reforming and dealing with these things in terms of campaign finance and those things. Definitely, from what I heard, definitely ready to deal with the money, which is, of course, a big subject of mine. And so we're giving Sabrina a little break here, and she'll be back shortly. All right, thanks for this one, JH Scott. I'm going to read that as thanks for the super chat. Yeah, if Bernie was against BDS and reparations, it's best to let Bernie's voice go the over way. Thanks for that. And thanks for this one, deconstructing topics. I am closely voting West, to be honest. If this is what it takes to end the duopoly, he sounds for the people genuinely. Thanks for that one. Where are we here? All right. And thanks for the super chat, Eric Gray. What is your policy on reparations? And I think Sabrina did ask that one, and I think he very clearly said that he's has been in favor of in dealing with the reparations questions for decades, and definitely would be a pro reparations candidate and president should he get that far. Thanks for this one, Christian 999. What's been good for Black America has always been good for all of America. Cut my ADOS and FBA brothers and sisters those checks with interest. Thanks for that. And thanks for this super chat. None of your business. Why did you support Biden knowing history and destruction of Black people? I think he did discuss that to some extent. And, the other thing I think to keep in mind with all this is that, this is the beginning of his run and what he's doing here. And so there's going to be more conversations. There's going to be more back and forth. I think it's pretty cool to have a serious presidential candidate who listens to what Sabrinasalvati says to him and listens to these voices from our lefty sphere. And so I think these conversations are going to be ongoing. Would you free Leonard Pelletier? And I believe I heard him say quite directly he would pardon all these types of political prisoners. And I think I heard him start to say Leonard Pelletier, and then he said another name, but I do think he did mean to include Leonard Pelletier among those names. And of course, that's something he could clarify, but I think that's definitely a yes. Mad Crab, I see in the chat asking, does Sabby plan on doing a call-in tonight? I don't think so. She might do one tomorrow, maybe not, but I don't think we're doing call-in tonight.
I might be able to do one. It'll have to be short though.
Oh, here she goes.
Yeah.
Comes in to stay.
I might be able to do a call-in tonight, but it'll have to be short. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to let you take over then.
Okay.
Right,
did you get all the super chats, Eric, or where are you?
I'm on this Leonard Pelletier one, so you can go down from there. There's still a lot of them.
Leonard. Oh, Joey from Joey.
Yeah, it's highlighted. I have it highlighted. You should see it as highlighted. You got the next one, super sticker from Juliet.
Okay. My order is different, I think. Oh, no, it's not. I think I'm just... Oh, there's a lot of them. Okay.
Yep. Keep on rocking.
I see it. Thank you for the super sticker, Juliet. Thank you for the super chat, Ravina. What's up? Would you pardon Julian Assange and Leonard Pelletier? I mentioned Julian. I forgot to mention Leonard, but I think the answer to both. I think the answer to Leonard would be yes as well.
I thought I
to be
heard him
honest.
when he said it, like he started to say Leonard Pelletier, and then he kind of went on to something else. But I think he really
I think so too.
would be on board.
Wow, thank you so much, Landrew, for the super chat. Cornel West 24, volunteer and donate. Thank you, Ned. Thank you for this interview. Please ask more about why People's Party specifically. Many concerns about the People's Party infrastructure. Why not green or elsewhere? I did ask that. Thank you, Eric. Professor West, what are your thoughts on both Marxism and anarchism? And do you actually favor one or the other? He did say he doesn't consider himself to be a communist, so to speak. Thank you, Themis. Thank you so much for becoming a Sabby member. Thank you for the super chat, Hobbs. Would Dr. West consider serving as second fiddle on a ticket with Shama Sawant? Shama Sawant cannot run for president in the United States. I think, if I remember correctly, I think I asked Shama this question. I don't think she was born here. So I think that's the issue with that. Thank you for the super sticker, Some Days. Thank you for the super chat, Cheddar. Have you tried the Flaming Hot Cool Ranch Doritos? And if not, why not? They rock, and so do y'all. Keep fighting the good fight. I have not. I don't like spicy food. Thank you for the super chat, Gordon. Thank you, Janice. Need to get 2 to 3 times what the state requires because the Dems will challenge every signature to prevent you from being on the ballot. That's a good point. They did that to Matthew Ho, actually. Thank you, Nefect. I respect and love your professionalism, Sabby. Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve. Good job asking all the right questions, Sabby, as always. Thank you, NRJ. Is Dr. West going to have us vote for Biden in November, like in 2020, to beat Trump, or ride his independent candidate position until elections are over? I did ask him that question towards the end. Thank you. None of your business. Nina sold us out too. Well, Nina did say voting for Joe Biden was like voting for a bowl of shit. Remember that. She did say that part. Thank you for this historic. Dr. West has my vote. Thank you for running, sir. Thank you, Shane. In honor of Brother West, Nick Brana must step down now. Chris Hedges is a much better replacement. Type a 1 in the chat if you agree. Thank you, historic. Shama Sawant, vice president. I don't know about the rules for vice president. I have to double check that. Shout out to NRJ for becoming a member. Thank you, a kid. Thanks, Sabby, for interviewing Cornel West and asking meaningful questions. Thank you, Rodrigo. Vibe was that he will tell people to vote for Biden. I got a different feeling towards the end there. It seemed like he may not go in that direction. Thank you, Bryce. Great interview, Sabby. And thank you, Terry. Great interview and great questions. And thank you, Chango. How pardoning of radio journalist Mumia Abu Jamal. He did mention Mumia as well. Thank you all so much. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our next story. If you have not heard, Brics is going to be expanding. And there was actually recently a summit that they had in Cape Town, South Africa, to discuss expanding Brics. And it appears that Mexico is moving closer and closer to their decision to possibly join Brics. Let's go ahead and dive right in here.
Brics is on a path of expansion, but there's been little progress in deciding who will make the cut after 2 days of meetings in Cape Town. At the moment, the group's made up of 5 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. At least 19 countries, including Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Gabon, have expressed interest in joining the bloc. For many, it's emerged as an alternative to Western dominance and potentially providing a counterbalance to the West.
It's a kind of a slightly ambivalent sort of organization because I think it likes to see itself as non-aligned. But, you know, if in the increasing polarized world that we're in at the moment, where Russia and the West, NATO, are at each other's throats, you know, to have one of those poles of the new conflict that is already a Brics member creates a complication there.
Its plan for a common currency for trade within the bloc has not been finalized, and for now wants to increase trade among its member states in their local currencies, ultimately reducing reliance on the US dollar. South Africa's Foreign Affairs Minister Naledi Pandor says the group is hoping for more cooperation.
We also looked at, I think, an important subject, which is what are the links that there should be between Brics and G20 in an increasingly, in our view, multipolar world. We have a sense that we're moving away from a unipolar and there's increasing interest in multipolarity.
So we're hearing this term again about a multipolar world. By the way, there are other channels that talk about this like all the time. By the way, Danny Haifong talks about this. Ben Norton talks about this. And this is becoming a more common phrase that we're hearing, where they want to have different countries have a seat at the table where one country is not driving the ship, so to speak. All these countries having more of a horizontal approach in reference to leading and not basically answering to one dominant power. So this is becoming more and more common.
So how do we draw together these formations that have a number of shared ideals and goals?
As countries around the world recover from the impact of the pandemic and the global economy remains in distress, leaders here say the growing Brics New Development Bank will continue to provide support to programs to end poverty. But as the bloc looks to expand, some say members like South Africa and Brazil may be concerned their influence could be reduced.
Just want to pause here in reference to ending poverty. That's one of the subjects that they're discussing, or seems like they're at least trying to do. And I think that's a big deal. Brazil obviously is a hot button for some people, and so is South Africa. So when you see all of these countries have come together on mainly just agreeing with the fact that we cannot have one dominant power in the world anymore, and we need to have a say as well. Maybe if all of us just came together, we would be stronger together and have some type of horizontal organization. So times are changing.
That the group may lack a clear identity and unified policy. Famida Miller, Al Jazeera, Cape.
So that's Al Jazeera. Obviously, this group is going to have issues. They have to figure out what are they going to agree around. They're trying to figure out a common idea for currency that they can all share possibly in the future, but they are going to have to reach some agreements now. And then there is this issue with Mexico. I told you a while back that Mexico was interested in joining Brics. It seems like they're getting closer and closer to making that decision. This video here, Brics confirms Mexico quest to join, should be a wake-up call for everyone. And if Mexico were to join Brics, what does that mean for the US dollar? This is a very important subject, and I sincerely hope everyone is paying attention to what is happening around the world.
Unanticipatedly, Mexico has elected to become a member of the Brics group. This decision has sparked a flurry of arguments and speculations about the implications that it will have for Mexico's national security, economic prospects, and relations with the United States. Before we proceed, kindly return the favor and give this video a thumbs up, subscribe.
Oh, we'll skip that part.
Becoming a member of the Brics alliance will have a considerable influence on the country's overall sense of national security. According to what was stated in an article published by StrikeSource, becoming a member of Brics would provide Mexico more influence when dealing with issues concerning domestic security. The members of the alliance have a plethora of experience in defending themselves against a variety of dangers, including terrorism and cyber warfare, among others. By working together, Mexico would be able to gain access to their knowledge and share relevant intelligence, both of which would strengthen the country's existing security infrastructure. The inclusion of Mexico in Brics raises more concerns about the organization's ability to survive in the long run. According to the article published by the Eurasia Media Network, the inclusion of Mexico might be an indication that the alliance has expanded beyond its initial bounds. This step demonstrates the Brics' growing significance on the world stage, as well as its willingness to welcome new members. The possibility of Mexico adopting the currency used by the Brics nations is also highlighted in this article. If Mexico did so, this would give more variation to the global monetary system. The decision to join Brics was made during a period in which tensions between Mexico and the United States were growing to an increasingly hostile level. According to the Mexican Daily Post, one reason for Mexico's interest in the BRICS is because the country's relations with the United States have been deteriorating.
And that's also the reason why some of those other countries have decided to join BRICS. A zombie in the air says the U.S. will let this happen. I mean, I don't know how they would stop it unless they were to invade Mexico. I think that would be very dangerous. But I don't know how else they could stop it. Like, honestly, I think these countries have had enough of the U.S. government domination over the world and over 800 military bases all over the world. I think they've just had enough and they're tired of this. But to this point, Mexico is getting tired of the relationship that they have with the United States. And if there are other countries that are willing to work with Mexico in a way where Mexico is not at the bottom and the other countries are on top, then I can understand why Mexico would be willing to join BRICS to free themselves of the hold from the U.S. government.
Which in turn has prompted Mexico's interest in the BRICS. As a result of Mexico's membership in BRICS, the country may have the opportunity to acquire access to a different economic and political system, which would reduce Mexico's dependency on the United States of America and open up new avenues for commerce and cooperation with the organization's other members. In terms of the economy, the fact that Mexico is now a member of the BRICS bloc may open up new opportunities for the country. According to a description provided in a blog post by Digital Turbine, the economy of Mexico is already in a position to be a significant participant outside of the BRICS countries. However, becoming a member of BRICS will significantly improve its economic prospects and provide it with access to a larger market. The article promotes Mexico as a viable partner for the BRICS alliance due to the country's big population, attractive geographical location, and plenty of natural resources. The likelihood of Mexico becoming a member of the BRICS bloc holds potential benefits, but it also raises concerns about potential tensions inside the organization. The Wilson Center looked into how the member countries of the BRICS already compete with one another on the domestic level and have different goals in mind. As a result of the addition of Mexico to the alliance, there will be a new voice and perspective to consider, which has the potential to make these dynamics more complex. Nevertheless,
I just want to add something here. Some of you may be wondering, well, are there any goods that we get from Mexico? Did you know, a lot of times people mention that a lot of the auto parts are made in China or made in Japan instead of being made in the United States like they used to be. Did you know that Mexico also makes auto parts for the United States? There's also food that we get from Mexico. There's a lot of trade here that could also be affected.
Nevertheless, these challenges may be conquered via effective communication and teamwork, which will ultimately result in a robust and productive partnership. China has a lot of influence inside the BRICS group because it is such a prominent member of the organization. An essay published in the Mexican Law Review highlights China's participation in the BRICS initiative and the advantages Mexico can gain from allying with China's economic might. The article also discusses the advantages Mexico can obtain from allying with China's participation in the BRICS initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, of China and the country's growing investment in Mexico both present opportunities for China and Mexico to collaborate on economic development and the construction of new infrastructure. There has been interest shown in Mexico's potential membership in BRICS from a number of other countries. According to Prensa Latina, a number of countries have expressed an interest in joining BRICS since they see it as a competitive alternative to established global powers.
Last I checked, it was 19 other countries that were interested in joining BRICS.
BRICS stands for the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa group. It is possible that Mexico's participation will set a precedent and inspire other nations to follow suit, so boosting the impact that the alliance has on the international stage. The ramifications of Mexico's membership in BRICS extend far beyond the realms of economics and national security. The verdict is significant in terms of geopolitics because it challenges the established order of the globe, which is now dominated by states in the West. An essay published by Deutsche Welle investigates how the BRICS nations reflect a multipolar world order while also serving as a counterbalance to the West. The addition of Mexico to the BRICS group broadens the spectrum of possibilities, increasing support for the concept of an international order that is more democratic and equitable, as well as a representation within the coalition. Another question that is brought up by the possibility of Mexico joining the BRICS is what the future holds for Mexico's relationship with the United States. According to a piece published by the Council on Foreign Relations, the decision was made at a time when relations between the United States and Mexico have been strained as a result of various concerns, including conflicts regarding trade and diverging approaches to immigration regulations. It is possible that Mexico's association with Brics will redefine its geopolitical stature as the country works to diversify its relationships and reduce its dependence on the country that lies to its north.
Yes, very interesting. And I'll go ahead and stop it there. But this is something we all need to keep our eye on. And I also have the question, what would this mean for the cartels if Mexico joins Brics? Would that be a pro for the cartels, or would that be a con? Like, would that help the cartels, or would it actually hurt the cartels? One of the things you have to understand in a country like Mexico, and I had a friend who was from Mexico that I met in grad school, they don't have some of the same opportunities that we have in this country. The way that he explained it to me is that in Mexico, if you're born poor, you die poor. They don't have like a welfare program like we do in the United States. They don't have like these social programs that can help people somewhat to help you get out of that poverty situation. And it's hard to get out of poverty in the United States, even though we have social programs. And the reason why he said that is because the cartels control so much. So the thing is, what would this mean to the cartel industry? Thank you so much for this, Eric. Eric says in 2020, the U.S. imported around $325 billion in goods, about 14% from total imports. So this is huge news. But what would happen? What would happen to the U.S. dollar if Mexico were to join Brics? What happens if they accept that new currency? Listen to this. Mexico's alignment with Brics could alter the geopolitical dynamics in the North and Latin American region. It may result in the reconfiguration of alliances and partnerships, potentially impacting Mexico's relationship with other countries, particularly those outside Brics. The move could also lead to closer ties with BRIC members and reshape global power dynamics. What happens to the US dollar if Brics launches a new currency? In addition, Mexico accepting Brics currency for international trade could pave the way for Latin American countries to cut ties with the US dollar. Boom. And then what happens? The Brics currency could capture the Latin American markets, making other nations in reliance on the US dollar as well. You see how this can spread? Mexico's participation might be an important gateway for the Brics currency to access and trade in Latin American markets. The move might extend to areas such as diplomacy, security, and cultural exchanges, fostering closer relationships among the participating nations. So, yeah. This is why I've been watching this story. And I know I've mentioned it a couple of times, Mexico is thinking about joining Brics, but I've been checking this every week because this is what it could mean for the rest of us in reference to the US dollar. So we have to pay attention to what is happening globally around the world, not just what's happening in our country. See what I mean when I say that foreign policy, in my opinion, is domestic policy? Because in some way, shape, or form, we're usually either a part of it or we're affected. So we'll keep our eye on the story, guys. It's still developing. Thank you, foe. Get ready for a coup or assassination in Mexico. Thank you, Roger. Yes, Sab, North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. And thank you for the super sticker, Susanna. Thank you so much. Yeah, buddy. Times are changing. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next story. Now, Tucker Carlson, if you're not aware, he actually did launch his first episode on Twitter. Remember, we said a while back that Elon Musk offered him this opportunity to still host a show, only hosted on Twitter. Now, this is after he has been fired from Fox News. And oh boy, if you want to talk about views, The number of people who watched this episode, it is absolutely insane. Here to break it down really quickly, and then we'll get into the episode. Nico House, he's been making these awesome clips. Nico has a new company called Hotspot. It's kind of a TikTok style where he really breaks these things down for you very quickly. It's really funny, but very informative. Check this out.
Tucker Carlson recorded his very first episode on Twitter and almost broke the internet. As it currently stands right now, Tucker has 65 million views on that video. And I'm 100% positive cable news and the mainstream media is probably like, yo, what the fuck is going on? And to be honest, it's pretty simple. After being lied to about Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine, Libya, Russiagate, and countless other stories, people have decided that they would rather follow somebody who gets it wrong some of the time that they believe at least have good intentions than to follow cable news networks who get it wrong all of the time, who exemplify time and time again that they have overtly malicious intentions. Tucker Carlson recorded his very first episode on Twitter.
So yeah, that's a really good point that Nico mentioned, all of the times we've been lied to by mainstream media. By the way, that episode now has over 100 million views. So when Nico made that video, it was at about 60 million at that point in time. And in this episode, Tucker Carlson is discussing, I don't know if you heard this new development about the dam in Russia. Now by they, I mean mainstream media is saying that Russia blew up their own dam. You know, it's like we're really supposed to sit here and believe Russia blew up their own bridge, their own pipeline, and now their own dam. Listen to what Tucker Carlson has to say. And you can see the view count here, 108 million views. By the way, his show on Fox News usually got about, I think, roughly 3 million viewers. Mainstream media is struggling. I'm going to show you another clip after this of what just happened at CNN. They are struggling. But let's get into this first episode.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. This morning it looks like somebody blew up the Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine. The rushing wall of water wiped out entire villages, destroyed a critical hydropower plant, and as of tonight puts the largest nuclear reactor in Europe in danger of melting down. So if this was intentional, it was not a military tactic, it was an act of terrorism. The question is, who did it? Well, let's see. The Kakhovka Dam was effectively Russian. It was built by the Russian government. It currently sits in Russian-controlled territory.
That's why I said their own dam. It's their own dam, okay?
The dam's reservoir supplies water to Crimea, which has been, for the last 240 years, home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Blowing up the dam may be bad for Ukraine, but it hurts Russia more. And for precisely that reason, the Ukrainian government has considered destroying it. In December, the Washington Post quoted a Ukrainian general saying his men had fired American-made rockets at the dam's floodgate as a test strike.
Notice he said that it actually would hurt Ukraine, but it also hurts Russia even more. So I asked that question again. Why would they blow up their own dam? See, these are the kind of talking points that you're not hearing on mainstream media. This is why this is very important. So it's good that he has this show on Twitter. Although I think he probably would have been able to say some of this like on Fox News, but still, even on Fox News, you still have to be careful with what you say. And so this is a message that you're most likely not going to hear on mainstream media.
So really, once the facts start coming in, it becomes much less of a mystery what might have happened to the dam. Any fair person would conclude that the Ukrainians probably blew it up, just as you would assume they blew up Nord Stream, the Russian natural gas pipeline, last fall. And in fact, the Ukrainians did do that, as we now know. It's not like Vladimir Putin is anxious to wage war on himself. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, Mr. and Mrs. Cable News consumer. Vladimir Putin is exactly that sort of man, the sort of man who'd shoot himself to death in order to annoy you. We know this from the American media, which wasted no time this morning in accusing the Russians of sabotaging their own infrastructure. Bill Kristol, the man who once told us that Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11, immediately denounced Putin as a war criminal and even more savagely compared him to Donald Trump. The rest of the pundit class made similar, clearly coordinated noises. Putin did it! Putin did it! And their reasoning was simple. Putin is evil, and evil people do evil things purely for the dark joy of being evil. In this specific case, Putin attacked himself, which is the most evil thing you can do, and therefore perfectly in character for a man that evil. That was their explanation. No one who's paid to cover these things seemed to entertain even the possibility it could have been the Ukrainians who did it. No chance of that. Ukraine, as you may have heard, is led by a man called Zelensky. And we can say for a dead certain fact that he was not involved. He couldn't have been. Zelensky is too decent for terrorism. Now, you see him on television, and it's true you might form a different impression. Sweaty and rat-like, a comedian turned oligarch, a persecutor of Christians, a friend of BlackRock. But don't believe your own eyes. Actually, Mr. Zelensky is a very good man. The best, really. As George W. Bush once noted, he is our generation's Winston Churchill. Of all the people in the world, our shifty, dead-eyed Ukrainian friend in the tracksuit is uniquely incapable of blowing up a dam.
He said in the tracksuit.
He's literally a living saint, a man in whom there is no sin. That's why Lindsey Graham is so attracted to him. They're just two good people, hanging out together and being good. And like all good people, when they meet in person, they spend a lot of time talking about killing people and laughing like friends do. Here's the pair last week.
Free or die.
Free or die.
Now you are free.
Yes.
And we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
It's the best money we've ever spent.
Did you hear that from Lindsey Graham? Why would you applaud people dying?
Thank you so much.
No, it's...
The Russians are dying. It's the best money we've ever spent, Graham says. A smile spreads across his thin, quivering lips as he forms the words.
He said he has thin lips.
He looks like a starving man contemplating a breakfast buffet. The aroma of death has aroused Lindsey Graham. Thanks so much, replies Zelensky. He feels the same way. See, there's nothing dark here. Just two middle-aged guys celebrating the killing of a population. They don't seem like the kind of people who'd enjoy flooding villages or starting a famine. And in any case, who cares if they are? It's really not your business. Your job is to support Ukraine. Watch Nikki Haley, a Republican candidate for president, explain this principle on CNN.
A win for Ukraine is a win for all of us. And for them to sit there and say that this is a territorial dispute, that's just not the case. To say that we should stay neutral, it is in the best interest of America. It's in the best interest of our national security for Ukraine to win.
This woman is probably one of the biggest frauds. She was my governor when I lived in South Carolina. She was my governor. I remember when she ran for governor, her own party was actually, there were people in her own party in the state house that were smearing her with racist remarks. I'll never forget this. Can't remember the gentleman's name, but I'll never forget that remark that he made when he said, we already have a raghead in the White House. We don't need one in the State House. For those who don't know, Nikki is Sikh. So that's why he said that in reference to like a raghead. It's absolutely ridiculous. But then that same woman, knowing she got racist attacks when she was running for governor of South Carolina, will turn around and say that we don't have a racism problem in this country. That's how I'm telling you, she is the biggest fraud.
Have to see this through. We have to finish it.
See? It's very easy to understand. It is vitally important for you to support Ukraine because it's necessary for Ukraine to be supported by you. Your support is mandatory until it's finished, whatever it is, and whatever that means. So shut up and support Ukraine or else you're in trouble. Back when they still taught logic, statements like this were known as tautologies. Something is true because it is. The more you repeat it, the truer it becomes. It's a self-reinforcing reality. There was a time when tautologies were considered illegitimate arguments, not to mention hilariously stupid. Only dumb people talk like that. Now everybody in power talks like that. Diversity is our strength. Trans women are women. Zelensky is Churchill. It's all self-evidently true, doesn't need an explanation, and don't ask questions. Sound familiar? Of course it does. That's the pap they're serving us day after day in steaming, lumpy portions. By this point, it's possible that American citizens are the least informed people in the world. Your average yak herder in Tajikistan knows who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline.
I would actually say it's not so much that we're the worst informed. I think we're the most propagandized country in the world. We don't question the news the way that we should. We tend to believe cable news when we probably should not for the most part. I think we're just more propagandized. And that's a sad reality. You go to other countries, you start to see that.
It's obvious. Does he think some skinny dude in a dress is actually a girl? Come on. That idea would never occur to him. You've got to be lied to at full volume over a period of years in order to reach conclusions like that. And of course, we have been. The media lie. They do. But mostly they just ignore the stories that matter. What's happened to the hundreds of billions of US dollars we've sent to Ukraine? No clue. Who organized those BLM riots 3 years ago? No one's gotten to the bottom of that. What exactly happened on 9/11? Well, it's still classified. How did Jeff?
I'm not going to get too much into the 9/11 stuff because I am on YouTube, but there have been other people, at least during that time, that were in Congress that did push for more information to be revealed. Cynthia McKinney was one of those people that pushed for more information to be revealed about September 11. But when he's talking about like the more important issues, you know, in reference to like the BLM riots, I'm just like, nah, I don't know if, number one, I don't know if I would call them riots. I think people were just really angry and had every right to be. But it's interesting because you start to see what he considers to be a more important issue compared to what you may consider to be a more important issue. So that's important to think about.
Jeffrey Epstein make all that money? How did he die? How about JFK? And so endlessly on. Not only are the media not interested in any of this, they are actively hostile to anybody who is. In journalism, curiosity is the gravest crime. Yesterday, for example, a former Air Force officer who worked for years in military intelligence came forward as a whistleblower to reveal that the U.S. government has physical evidence of crashed non-human-made aircraft, as well as the bodies of the pilots who flew those aircraft. The Pentagon has spent decades studying these otherworldly remains in order to build more technologically advanced weapons systems.
But the Pentagon can't even pass an audit. So, and that's another thing. When he mentions the money that went to Ukraine, like where did all that money go? The Pentagon they can't even pass the audit. You know, if that was you, the IRS would be coming for you. Okay. They would come for you and everything that you own, your property, your cars, whatever you have, to pay it back. So it's just really interesting to me how they can get away with not passing an audit multiple times, by the way, not a one-off, but you can't do that.
Okay. That's what the former intel officer revealed, and it was clear he was telling the truth. In other words, UFOs are actually real, and apparently so is extraterrestrial life. Now we know. In a normal country, this news would qualify as a bombshell, the story of the millennium. But in our country, it doesn't. The whistleblower's account ran on a technology website called The Debrief, which you've probably never heard of. The Washington Post had that story, but decided not to run it. The New York Times, meanwhile, just pretended it never happened. On the front page of the New York Times website this morning, there were 5 stories about Ukraine, as well as 4 stories apiece about Donald Trump, trans people, and climate change, the usual lineup. There was nothing at all about how an alien species is flying hypersonic aircraft over our cities. Not one word.
I have to look into that story. I think Jimmy Dore may have talked about that briefly tonight in reference to UFO. So I have to look into that story a little bit more.
So if you're wondering why our country seems so dysfunctional, this is a big part of the reason. Nobody knows what's happening. A small group of people control access to all relevant information, and the rest of us don't know. We're allowed to yap all we want about racism, But go ahead and talk about something that really matters and see what happens. If you keep it up, they'll make you be quiet. Trust us.
Who can we point to for an example of that? Someone that was made to keep quiet. Phil Donahue was one of those people made to keep quiet. They took his show away from him. Arsenio Hall's show was removed from him because he brought on Louis Farrakhan, and he was warned prior to that, if he were to bring him on, that he would be done, and he brought him on anyway. So, props to Arsenio Hall for not agreeing to the censorship. But we know what people tell us. We know what mainstream media tells us. And if mainstream media is all you watch and you don't know about independent media, which the vast majority of Americans do not. The vast majority of Americans, as much as we've talked about on this show, the vast majority of Americans have no idea who, Max Blumenthal, the Gray Zone, they have no idea what that is. I know, because when I bring it up, they're like, what is that? The vast majority don't know. The vast majority of Americans have no idea who some of these investigative journalists are that are uncovering these stories abroad, like a Wyatt Reed, like Fiorella Isabel, Chris Hedges, when he used to uncover those war stories abroad. The vast majority of Americans are not tuned into independent media. They're tuned into corporate mainstream media. So if corporate mainstream media has you focusing on certain issues, it's usually for a reason. If you're focusing on the celebrity newest drama of what has happened with Kanye West, what's happening with Kim Kardashian, that type of information, then you're not paying attention to what's really going on. You're not paying attention to the fact that BlackRock is buying up houses. Because for the most part, mainstream media isn't talking about that. You're not paying attention to who is moving money where and how it's being moved. You're not paying attention to the fact that I remember there was another story. It was a drama story that was in the news at that point in time. And I remember at that same time, that was when they had just kicked people off of Medicaid because the emergency status was lifted in reference to the pandemic. But again, if you were paying attention to the drama, then unless you were on Medicaid and were directly affected, a lot of people had no idea. This is on purpose. Mainstream media, their goal is to give you the news, but it's only to give you the news that they want you to see. They're not telling you everything that's actually newsworthy. All of those segments have to be approved by producers. If you work at a newspaper, they have to be approved by editors. So that's how it works. And I think because of independent media, and I think because of, outlets like YouTube and Rumble, people are starting to look for other options and other sources. And mainstream media is starting to take a hit. Part of that happened after Biden won in 2020. Trump gave them ratings. Turns out Joe Biden doesn't really give them those same type of ratings. I wonder why. So they are taking a hit. We've seen numerous people either fired or left CNN. There's been shufflings around at Fox as well. But even right now, CNN's own CEO is leaving the network. He's only been there for a little over a year. Listen to this.
Well, Chris Licht is officially out at CNN after a chaotic run as chairman and CEO. The network announced this morning that Licht is leaving immediately. He took over the job just about a year ago, but his time at CNN has been marked with a series of high-profile controversies and tanking ratings. NBC News senior national correspondent Stephanie Gosk is following the story for us. Stephanie, good to have you. So Licht has been facing backlash for weeks now. It all sort of seemed to come to a head over the weekend after The Atlantic wrote a scathing 15,000-word profile. He actually apologized to the staff earlier this week, said he would work hard to win back their trust, but now it looks like he won't have that chance, Steph.
Yeah, Vicky, that article kind of chronicles in minute detail everything about his tenure at CNN. You had David Zaslav today, who's the head of Warner Brothers and Discovery, come out with a statement and he said, listen, this was going to be a tough job from the beginning, that Chris Licht took some hits like other people had taken at CNN. And ultimately, he said, Chris Licht put his heart and soul into this job, but it didn't last long. As you mentioned, just 13 months. He took over after Jeff Zucker had left amidst a scandal that he had had a relationship with his number two for a significant period of time. And he took over CNN Plus, which you'll remember he dismantled very early on and then had to lay off hundreds of people. But most recently,
I'm sorry, I have to mention he dismantled CNN Plus because they weren't getting views. Like, she left that part out, so I just wanted to make sure I put that in there. Oh, man.
But most recently, two incidents that have led most likely to this announcement today. You have the Donald Trump town hall that was held. That was widely criticized. It was a town hall with Caitlin Collins, who's their up and rising star there at CNN. The room filled with Trump supporters. And he ended up railroading that event, Donald Trump did, and repeating some of the things that he typically has said about the election and other things, other lies that were tough to beat down in that forum. Then you follow that by that article that you mentioned, and it all just became too much in that announcement today that he would be leaving the company.
So see what they're trying to do? They're trying to mainly put the blame so much on him choosing to host that Trump town hall. I don't think it's just about that. I mean, that actually gave them a lot of ratings. And if it's news, like, why does it matter if you're interviewing someone who's a Republican or who's a Democrat if it's news? Problem is, it's not just news. It has a slant, it has a bias, right? But I don't think that's necessarily the reason. Look, the ratings suck at CNN. They have been tanking ever since Biden won in 2020. That Trump town hall actually brought more ratings over, but just for that town hall. And so I think CNN, there's a lot of pressure there to try to find some type of team of leadership that is going to make things right, to get those ratings back up, get subscriptions back up. And it just doesn't seem to be working, no matter what they're doing. And I think they know what the real problem is, but they can't change it. And the real problem is the fact that you guys lie to people. You're 24-hour news, but the quality is not good because you just lie constantly. And I think the American people, a lot of people are just tired of it. If you needed to have Trump town hall on your network in order to get people to come over and watch you, and you're supposed to be the liberal outlet, what does that tell you about your network? It's a mess.
Stephanie, CNN has appointed a 4-person team to lead the network for now. What else do we know about the company's plans moving forward?
Well, there are a lot of positions to fill at CNN, Vicky. They say that they are not going to rush to choose someone to be the permanent successor to Chris Licht. So they've got some people there that have been at the company for a while, including Amy Antelis, who's been there for quite some time, to kind of steer the ship. But they also have to figure out what they're going to do with that morning show. Don Lemon, as you know, left the company after he had said some disparaging remarks about women.
He didn't leave. He was fired. See, even this is NBC News, even they can't tell the truth right now. Boy, I tell you.
That morning show, which is really kind of the flagship for CNN, needs a permanent staff as well. Vicky?
All right. NBC News senior national correspondent helping us track all those changes. Stephanie Goss, Steph, thank you.
So, yeah. So that's why someone like Tucker Carlson can have a show on Twitter and he can get almost 100 million views. That's why. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin hemp. Trump's more against the war in Ukraine than Biden. Democrats also gave tons of money to the police. The WHO are also even worse fascists. It'll be interesting to see Dr. West debate him Didn't Bush and Bolton do a master class? Yes, they did. The whole master class thing is just cracking me up. And Hillary Clinton, too. Hillary Clinton also did a master class. Let me go to some of these comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. I think Mexico has WMDs, their prez, evil like Assad. Interesting. Thank you for the super chat, DC. The U.S. assassinated leading Mexican presidential candidate Luis Donaldo Colosio in 1994. What major economic agreement was enacted that year? NAFTA. Interesting. The Oracle says Tucker still panders to the low information processors. Thank you for the super chat, Andrea. Has anyone seen what's happening in France? There's no news about the pension reform protests for weeks. Yes, I haven't covered it I've covered it a lot, but I haven't covered it the past couple weeks because I had difficulty finding information. It seems like they're starting to suppress that more now, and it sucks. It really does. If you find some more info on it, guys, email it to me. Let me know, because I've been checking on it every week, and it's really hard for me to find information that I actually trust. Let's put it that way. Okay. Let me make sure I got everybody. Yeah. We're moving on to our next story. So we have been talking about the Twitter files on this show actually for quite some time, even though Matt Taibbi is no longer involved in this project, so to speak. The project is still continuing, and Aaron Mate actually is now a part of this project, and he just released some bombshell information that I think all of you are going to want to see. So Aaron Mate said, new Twitter files. The FBI is helping Ukraine censor Twitter users, including journalists. FBI. The FBI aided a Ukrainian intelligence effort to ban Twitter users and collect their data. Twitter declined to censor journalists targeted by Ukraine, including Aaron Mate. When we talk about the government agencies and their reach, it's a problem. So you have these journalists like Aaron Mate, who is now on the Ukrainian kill list. We've talked about that list before. Roger Waters is on that list. Jimmy Dore is now on that list. It was really random. I'm like, you guys put a musician and a comedian on that list. Anyway, there's children that are on that list. Anya is also on that list from the gray zone. But when you see something like this that says the FBI is helping Ukraine censor Twitter users, including journalists, Twitter declined to censor journalists targeted by Ukraine, including Aaron Mate. The FBI aided a Ukrainian intelligence effort to ban Twitter users and collect their data. Why are they trying to collect your data? This is why I'm going to get to the article from the Gray Zone, but this is exactly why I have said time and time again that these platforms, Twitter, YouTube, Google, they need to be nationalized. And I say this because without our data, these platforms don't exist, but we don't get anything for it. Think about it. We don't get anything for it. How much is Elon Musk making? How much was Jack, the previous owner of Twitter, making? What did you get? But the FBI can just try to steal our data. Now, the Gray Zone wrote an article about this. And there they are there. Leaks reveal the FBI helps Ukraine censor Twitter users and obtain their info. Here we go. The FBI has aided a Ukrainian intelligence effort to censor social media users and obtain their personal information. Leaked emails are revealing this. March 2022, an FBI special agent sent Twitter a list of accounts on behalf of the Security Service of Ukraine, Ukraine's main intelligence agency. The accounts, the FBI wrote, are suspected by the SBU in spreading fear and disinformation. In an attached memo, the SBU asked Twitter to remove the accounts and hand over their user data. Now, to that point, what are they going to do with that data? And two, when they talk about they're spreading disinformation and fear, give examples. What are they saying? Is it fear? Is it disinformation? Or is it just information that you don't approve of? I think it's the latter. Let's go on. The Ukrainian government's FBI-enabled targets extend to members of the media. The SBU list that the FBI provided to Twitter included my name and Twitter profile. That's Aaron talking about himself. In its response to the FBI, Twitter agreed to review the accounts. To review the accounts. Where did I go here? I think it skipped ahead. Oh, here we go. To review the accounts for inauthenticity, but raised concerns about the inclusion of me and other American and Canadian journalists. The FBI attempt to ban Twitter accounts at the request of the Ukrainian intelligence is among the most overt requests for censorship revealed to date in the Twitter files. A cache of leaked communications from the social media giant. This is something I want to say here in reference to Ukrainian intelligence. Now you have another country working with the FBI to censor people. Imagine if we didn't know this information. The FBI's censorship request was relayed in a March 27th, 2022 email from FBI Special Agent Alexander Kabinets, the assistant legal attaché, at the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, to two Twitter executives. 4 FBI colleagues were copied on the exchange. Thank you very much for your time to discuss the assistance to Ukraine. I am including a list of accounts I received over a couple of weeks from the Security Service of Ukraine. These accounts are suspected by the SBU in spreading fear and disinformation for your review and consideration. And here is a screenshot of that email here. So this email was sent to Marlena and Yoel. We've heard about Yoel Roth throughout these Twitter files, asking for that information. The attached document drafted by Ukraine's SBU contained 163 accounts, including mine. That's Aaron. This list is numbered to 175, but some accounts have 2 corresponding numerical lines. The listed Twitter profiles the SBU alleged have been used to disseminate disinformation and fake news to inaccurately reflect events in Ukraine, to justify war crimes of the Russian authorities on the territory of the Ukrainian state in violation of international law. In order to stop Russian aggression on the information front, the SBU continued, we kindly ask you to take urgent measures to block these Twitter accounts and provide us with their user data specified during registration. Again, what were they going to do with that data that was given to them? The SBU expressed its gratitude for the existing level of interaction. And then there's the gratitude there. If granted, the users on the list would not only have been banned from Twitter, but had their phone number, date of birth, and email address disclosed to both the FBI and the SBU. Phone number, date of birth, and email address. This is terrible. It says you can read the full list of accounts targeted by the FBI and SBU here. Let's check it out, folks. I'm just going to skip through and see if there's anyone else I recognize. Unfortunately, the rest of this is unfortunately, the rest of it is not in English. Sorry, guys. I wish I could. Oh, there's Alexander. Some of them are, some of them are not. But interesting. In response, Yoel Roth, Twitter's then head of trust and safety, informed Special Agent Kobzanets and his FBI colleagues that Twitter would review the reported accounts under our rules. But he warned that the list included a few accounts of American and Canadian journalists like Aaron. Therefore, Roth said Twitter's review would focus first and foremost on identifying any potential inauthenticity. Roth then suggested that he would be open to suspending accounts if it could be proven that they have a hidden tie to a foreign government. Journalists who cover the conflict with a pro-Russian stance are unlikely to be found in violation of our rules, absent other contexts that might establish some type of covert/deceptive association between them and a government. Any additional information or context in those areas is, of course, welcome and appreciated. And so here's the email that explains that there, and you can see there's Aaron's name there. In the reply, Kobzanets did not directly acknowledge Roth's concerns about Ukraine's FBI-abated effort to censor journalists. Understood. Whatever your review determines, an action Twitter deems is appropriate. He also indicated that the FBI would not meet Roth's request for any context that might establish ties between journalists and a foreign government. Unlikely there will be any additional information or context. Inside Twitter, Roth forwarded the FBI request to 2 colleagues. This is the output of our meeting with the FBI last week. The list of accounts is a mixed bag. There's some state media mixed in with a bunch of other stuff. But given the context, I think a deep dive here is warranted. Now, that was November of 2022. Now, remember, the Twitter file started a couple months ago. When did Matt Taibbi come on here? That was that April? Twitter file started a couple months ago, right? So that was more of a recent effort. It goes forward to say in an email, Special Agent Kobzanets, if he had vetted, they were asking him if he had vetted Ukraine's censorship request list before sending it to Twitter. I also asked him if after being informed by Twitter's Roth that the FBI was trying to censor journalists on the SBU's behalf, whether that had prompted any review or revision of his assistance to Ukrainian intelligence. Kobzanets did not respond. The FBI's National Press Office also declined to answer questions. Among several queries, I invoked Twitter's warning that the FBI's assistance to Ukraine entailed censoring journalists and asked if that has prompted any changes to the Bureau's collaboration with Ukrainian intelligence. While we appreciate your inquiry, as a matter of practice, we do not confirm, deny, or otherwise comment on specific interactions, nor confirm the veracity of correspondence. That's coming from an FBI spokesperson. So I'm not going to read the entire article because it is rather lengthy, as you can imagine. But I do want to mention this piece here. Those marked for censorship by Ukraine but remain online include Russian politicians, yada, yada. The list also includes Russian journalists. So you can see those there. But the Ukrainian nationalist target by the SBU suppression requests include Anatoly Shary, a video blogger and a politician who fled Ukraine in 2012 and subsequently received European Union asylum. It goes on to mention more people. I don't think I went to the right part yet. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Last year, the Global Tech Media Conference Web Summit withdrew a speaking invitation to the Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal and I after Alina Zelenska, the wife of Ukrainian President Zelensky, demanded our cancellation. I remember that. I covered that story. Another Gray Zone colleague, Kit Clarenberg, was recently detained and interrogated about his journalism by British authorities. I covered that story as well. So and I've said this before and I'll say it again, it is very clear that the gray zone is a target. And it's not just the gray zone. The point that we need to really think about here is the fact that, number one, yes, there are issues with the FBI. There are also issues with the CIA, which the Twitter files has revealed as well. But now we have a story where the FBI was actually working with Ukrainian intelligence to censor people on Twitter and to request to distribute their data, their personal information, their phone number, and their email address. This is very dangerous, and this is an invasion of privacy. And this is what I want you to take home from this story. Your privacy should not be invaded. If they wanted people to have their phone number, their email address, they would give them that public information, but they have not. So this is very dangerous. This is how far the FBI is going now. This is how far they'll go. What's next? I mean, I thought it was one thing when I told you the story about the Hunter Biden laptop, how they wanted to cover that up. I thought that was a big doozy. But this, we are not safe on these social media platforms. We're not safe. We're not protected, I should say. We are not protected on these platforms. And that's very scary and it's very concerning. There's no way. No way. And what's really interesting to me, and I saw the email from Matt Taibbi's newsletter earlier today. Matt Taibbi pointed this out in his newsletter today. Mainstream media isn't even touching this. Not even talking about it. We are living in troubling times. Like, this is insane. How could you not reveal this information? How could you not even discuss it? The fact that you have the FBI is now working with a country which is fighting in a war, a proxy war, to censor journalists. Do you guys see it's all now connected? All of it. You can't spread the information if you cut off the journalists who are covering the information. If you cut off the journalists that are covering the information and reporting these stories, then the stories aren't on social media for you to retweet and share with your friends. So the information doesn't get out to the people. And that's what this is all about. This is a more extreme form of censorship. It's a hot mess. Very hot mess. But interesting story. I'm sure there'll be more Twitter files coming forward. But I still want to see, and I stand by it, I still want to see the Facebook files, and I want to see the YouTube files. Interesting. Interesting. I'll go to some of the comments. Let me take that comment on Rockfin, Eric, and then I'll get the ones on YouTube. Nationalize these platforms, buddy. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin DC. Alexander Kobzanets is a double agent. He is both an FBI email address and title within the Ukrainian government. Also, embassies operate under the U.S. State Department, not the DOJ, which the FBI operates under. Sketchy as fuck. Exactly. This is crazy. This is crazy. So I think we are going to do call-in tonight after all. Seems like you guys want to do it. It will not be a long one. I will not be talking for 3 hours tonight. But we can do call-in tonight. But scary out there, man. Scary out there. Dwayne says Sabby is correct. Nationalize these platforms. They are a utility. Social media is a utility. That depends on our data. Desert Manta says Ed Snowden told us about the surveillance. Right. Marcia, thank you. Says Sabby, why don't you use Means TV or Nebula? Means TV at one point did reach out to those of us at RBN. I don't think we were able to come to an agreement. It's a little bit different. But I do like Means TV, but we just didn't come to an agreement. The Oracle says she who controls the narrative owns the day and eventually rules the world. There you go. I don't know. All right, let's do call in. I'll go ahead and make the room. What should I call the room? This is episode 111. Episode 111. I guess we'll call it the Cornel West interview, probably. That's probably what you guys want to talk about. Okay, let's chat about it. Not going to write a lengthy description this time. At the show, the date, the time. What time is it now? 10 for there. 10:45. Yeah, I think I can hop off of here on time. 10:45. And save. All right, it is there. Now let me go ahead and I'll share the link. Copy the link. Share the link. Do 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 do. I do have a Super Mario Brothers theme in my head. I can't remember why. I think I heard it on a commercial. Oh no, I know why. There's a Super Mario Brothers movie that's coming out. Hold on, let me see. And I was debating, should I see that? I pinned the message. Okay, the call-in link is now pinned to the top of the chat. And let's hop over there. Again, we won't be over there for 3 hours. Okay. Sabby has to get up a little early. But we can go ahead and hop on over there. All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night. I'll also be on RBN tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time before I'm on here. I'll come back here at 8 p.m. Don't forget to hit the like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. And you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.